Welcome back to our night listeners. This Scary Stories channel explores psychological and mind-bending horror, where reality feels just slightly off. If you enjoy the stories, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Get cozy. Story 1. I took a job transcribing dreams and started living someone else's. The posting was buried under data entry gigs on a sketchy freelancer site I only checked when rent was due. Dream transcription needed, $50 per hour, flexible hours, no experience necessary, serious inquiries only. Contact A. It reeked of scam, but $50 an hour for typing. My laptop was held together with duct tape, my savings account had less than the cost of a decent sandwich, and my last temp job, filing invoices for a company that imported novelty garden gnomes, had ended when the owner discovered I'd accidentally shredded his prized no-mayo figurine. Desperation makes you ignore red flags the size of barn doors. I emailed A with a generic resume I'd used for pet-sitting gigs. The reply came an hour later. No pleasantries, just an address in the industrial district, a converted warehouse district known for artists' lofts and abandoned factories, and a time, 10 p.m. Come, alone. Bring your laptop, cash payment. The building was a hulking silhouette against the sodium vapor streetlights, windows dark except for a single flickering bulb on the third floor. The lobby smelled of damp concrete and rat poison. The elevator groaned like a dying animal, stopping with a violent shudder 2 floors up. I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the hollow stairwell. The third-floor hallway was lined with peeling paint and the ghost of cigarette smoke. One door stood slightly ajar, light spilling out onto the grimy linoleum. A handmade sign taped to it read, "Heiress, no soliciting." Inside was not what I expected. No cluttered office, no eccentric dream researcher surrounded by books. Just a single, sterile room. Bare concrete walls, a single metal folding table, 2 chairs, and a man who couldn't have been more than 30, dressed in an immaculate, if slightly rumpled, gray suit. He had thinning hair combed severely back, wire-rimmed glasses, and eyes that held no warmth. He didn't smile, didn't stand, just gestured to the chair opposite him. "You're late," he stated. His voice was flat, toneless. "I am Heiress. You have the laptop?" I fumbled it out of my bag, the cheap plastic casing feeling flimsy under his scrutiny. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Inside are audio recordings, 3, each approximately 1 hour in length. Transcribe them verbatim, every sigh, every mumble, every pause. Use this template. He tapped a printed sheet with precise columns for time code, audio description, and verbatim text. Payment upon completion. Cash. Do not listen to the recordings outside this room. Do not discuss the content with anyone. Do not ask questions. Is this understood? It felt like signing a contract with a ghost, but the envelope felt heavy, thick. I counted 10 crisp $100 bills inside, $300 for 3 hours of typing. I swallowed hard. Understood. He produced a small, old-fashioned cassette recorder, a relic I hadn't seen since middle school, and 3 cassettes labeled only with numbers in neat black ink. Begin. The first recording was unremarkable. A woman's voice, young, slightly breathy, describing a dream about being lost in a sunflower field. She mentioned the smell of hot earth, the buzz of bees, the way the towering flowers seemed to whisper secrets she couldn't quite hear. I typed mechanically, the rhythmic clack of the keys loud in the silent room, Aris watched me, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. When it ended, he wordlessly exchanged a cassette for the next one. Payment for the first hour landed on the table with a soft thud. $100. Real. Tangible. The second cassette was different. A man's voice, older, rougher. He spoke of a recurring dream. Walking down a narrow alleyway slick with rain, the smell of wet brick and something sweetly rotten hanging in the air. He described a flickering neon sign above a door he could never reach, just the red glow reflecting on the puddles. Halfway through, his voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "It's behind me. I can hear its footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like wet stones dragging on concrete. Don't look back. Don't look back." Then a choked gasp, static and silence. My fingers hovered over the keys. The air in the room felt colder. Aris didn't react. He just stared at the wall behind me, his face a mask. The third cassette was the worst. No voice, just sounds. Heavy, wet breathing, the squelch of mud underfoot. Distant, distorted piano music playing a lullaby I almost recognized but couldn't place. And underneath it all, a low, rhythmic thumping, like a giant slow heartbeat coming from deep underground. It went on for 57 minutes. No words, just that oppressive soundscape. By the end, my neck was stiff, my shoulders knotted with tension I hadn't consciously felt. Aris took the cassette, counted out the final $200 without a word, and gestured to the door. "Return tomorrow at the same time. More recordings, same rules." I walked home under the jaundiced streetlights, the crisp bills burning a hole in my pocket. The city sounds, car horns, distant sirens, laughter from a bar, felt thin, unreal. The wet squelching sound from the cassette seemed to echo in the puddles on the sidewalk. The smell of wet brick from the man's dream clung to the back of my throat. I shook my head, trying to dislodge it. Just sounds, just a job. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it wasn't sleep, it was the alleyway. Rain slicked the cobblestones under my bare feet. Why were my feet bare? The neon sign glowed ahead. The rusty key cast its bloody reflections in the puddles, and behind me, the dragging sound. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. Closer than before. I tried to run, but my legs were leaden. I forced myself not to look back, just as the man in the recording had warned. But the dread was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, the echo of that wet, dragging sound still vibrating in my bones. 3:17 a.m. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just a nightmare. Stress. Too much caffeine. I made myself a strong cup of tea, the familiar ritual a lifeline. But as I sipped it, staring out the window at the sleeping city, I caught a whiff of something that didn't belong. Wet earth, and something sweetly, cloyingly rotten, like overripe fruit left in a damp basement. I threw the tea away. The next night at Aris's, the new recordings were worse. A child's voice describing a house with too many doors, all locked except one that led down into darkness, smelling of formaldehyde. An old woman rambling about teeth growing in the garden soil. And another soundscape, the creak of rope, the groan of old wood, the distant crash of waves, and a low guttural humming that seemed to vibrate in my molars. During the humming tape, my left hand began to tremble, not from nerves, a fine, persistent tremor like a plucked wire. I clenched it under the table. Aris's gaze flickered down to my hand, then back to the wall. No comment. Just the $300. The dreams bled harder. That night, I wasn't just in the sunflower field. I was the dreamer. I felt the rough stalks against my arms, smelled the dusty pollen, heard the whispers not as words but as vibrations in my teeth. And the whispers were saying my name, not my real name, my name, but a different one, Clara. The name felt warm, familiar, like a favorite sweater. I woke with tears on my cheeks, the scent of sunflowers thick in my nostrils, the taste of dust on my tongue. My laptop sat open on the desk, the screen dark. But the document for the sunflower dream was open, and at the very bottom, typed in a slightly different font, was a single line I hadn't written. Clara misses the field. She remembers the path home. I deleted it, wiped my browser history, took a cold shower. It didn't help. The next day, making coffee, I reached for the sugar bowl, the one with the chipped blue rim my grandmother gave me, and my hand faltered. I knew this bowl, but in my mind's eye it was replaced by a plain white ceramic mug with a chip on the handle, sitting on a formica counter in a kitchen flooded with morning light I didn't recognize, the smell of bacon frying, a man's low laugh from another room. His laugh. My hand shook, spilling coffee grounds everywhere. I cleaned it up, my breath coming fast. Sleep deprivation, that's all, just sleep deprivation. I skipped the third night at Eris's, told myself I needed a break, told myself the $600 I'd already earned was enough. I tried to work on legit freelance gigs, but the words on the screen blurred. The rhythmic thumping from the first soundscape tape pulsed behind my eyes. That night, the dream wasn't borrowed. It was mine, or it was his. I stood on a cliff edge under a bruised purple twilight sky. Below, a churning sea crashed against black rocks. The wind whipped my hair, but longer, darker. I wore a heavy fisherman's sweater that smelled of salt and pipe smoke. In my hand, I held a smooth gray stone, worn by the sea. I knew this stone, knew the weight of it, knew the exact spot on the cliff where the best skipping stones could be found. A deep, wordless contentment filled me, a feeling utterly alien to my own perpetually anxious life. Then the dragging sound. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. From the path behind me, the contentment shattered into ice-cold terror. I turned, not to see what was coming, but because he, the man whose life this was, knew he had to face it. The thing emerging from the mist wasn't a shape. It was an absence, a patch of deeper darkness that drank the twilight, moving with that awful wet dragon motion. It had no eyes, but I felt its attention like a physical pressure on my skin. It reached out a limb that wasn't quite a limb, trailing strands of viscous shadow. I tried to run, but his legs were rooted, frozen by a terror deeper than anything I'd ever known. The shadow limb touched the fisherman's sweater, cold, not cold like ice, cold like the void between stars, cold like forgotten graves. I felt his memories flood me, not as images, but as sensations. The smell of the sea on his father's jacket, the gritty taste of sand in a childhood sandwich, the crushing weight of grief when his dog Rusty didn't come back from the woods one autumn day, and beneath it all, a single desperate thought. Elias, my name is Elias. Let me go. I woke up on the floor of my apartment, curled in a ball, shivering violently. My cheek was pressed against the cold linoleum. My own name, my name, was gone, erased. Only Elias remained, burning bright and terrible in the hollow space where my identity should have been. I scrambled to the bathroom mirror. My face stared back, pale, wide-eyed, dark circles under the eyes. But the eyes, they held a depth of sadness, a weathered calm that wasn't mine. I touched my cheek. The reflection's hand moved, but the gesture felt foreign. The tremor in my left hand was constant now, a fine vibration I couldn't stop. I looked down at my fingers. They looked like mine, but the knuckles seemed thicker, the nails shorter, bitten. Elias's hands, calloused from mending nets, smelling faintly of salt and brine. Panic, cold and absolute seized me. I grabbed my keys, my phone, anything to flee this apartment that suddenly felt like a borrowed cage. I needed to find Eris. He had to know. He had to fix this. The walk to the warehouse district was a nightmare. Street lights flickered as I passed. Car engines sputtered and died. People on the sidewalk seemed to blur at the edges, their voices muffled as if heard through thick glass. The smell of wet brick and something sweetly rotten followed me like a shadow. Halfway there, I stopped dead. A storefront window reflected not the city street, but the cliff edge, the bruised twilight sky, the churning black sea below. And in the reflection my face was older, lined by wind and sun, framed by longer salt-streaked hair. Elias's face. I spun around. Just the street, just the flickering lights. But the reflection had been real, more real than the pavement under my feet. Eris's door was locked. I pounded on it, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. "Aris, open up! You have to stop this! I'm not me anymore!" My voice sounded wrong, deeper, rougher. His voice. The door opened a crack. Aris's impassive face appeared. His eyes, behind the wire rims, swept over me, lingering on my trembling left hand. No surprise, only assessment. "You broke the rules," he stated flatly. "You listened outside the room. You carried them with you." "I didn't mean to. It's inside me. Elias, he's here! Get him out!" I tried to push past him, but he didn't budge. His hand shot out, surprisingly strong, and gripped my wrist. The trembling one. His touch was ice cold. The tremor stopped instantly under his grip, replaced by a numbness that spread up my arm. "Elias is not in you," Eris said, his voice devoid of inflection. "You are in him. The recordings, they are not dreams. They are anchors, tethers. Your mind, yourself, is weak, porous. It slipped through the tether. You are transcribing a life, not a dream. You are living the transcription." The numbness reached my shoulder. My thoughts felt thick, sluggish. Clara's sunflower field, the child's locked doors, the old woman's tooth garden. They weren't recordings anymore. They were memories. My memories. Alongside Elias's cliff, his stone, his dog Rusty. My own life, my tiny apartment, my shredded gnome job, my mother's worried voice on the phone last week, felt like a half-remembered movie, faded, unimportant. You knew this would happen?" I whispered, Elias's voice thick with a grief that wasn't mine. "Probability suggested it," Eris said, releasing my wrist. The numbness receded, but the tremor returned, weaker. Strong dreamers leave strong echoes. Weak transcribers absorb. It is efficient. The dreamer's life continues, uninterrupted. The transcriber fades, becomes the vessel. The memories overwrite the original substrate. It is cleaner this way, less messy than disposal. He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. The room was unchanged. The folding table, the chairs, the cassette recorder sat ready. 3 new cassettes lay beside it. Aris picked up the first one, his fingers brushing the label. "Elias has another recording tonight. A significant one. The cliff dream, the encounter. It must be transcribed precisely. The fear must be captured. It strengthens the tether." I looked at the chair, my chair, the place where Aha had sat, desperate for cash. Now, it was Elias's chair. The tremor in my hand was a constant reminder of the life I was losing, the life I was becoming. The smell of salt and brine clung to my skin. The weight of the smooth gray stone felt phantom in my pocket. Aris placed a cassette in the recorder. The red LED blinked on. He pressed play. The dragging sound filled the sterile room. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. Closer than ever before, from the speakers, from the hallway outside the door, from the hollow space where my name used to be. Aris slid a blank template across the table. His eyes met mine. Elias's eyes reflected in his glasses. "Begin transcription," he said. "Time code 0. Audio, heavy footsteps on wet earth. Voice, Elias. Whispering. My fingers, Elias's fingers, moved to the keyboard. They knew the keys. They knew the rhythm of the fear. The words began to flow, not from my mind, but from the salt-stained memories flooding in. It's here, the shadow. It knows my name. It always knows. The stone is cold in my hand. Rusty barked at the edge once, before the woods took him. Clara would sing that lullaby, the one from the piano, to make the dark less hungry. I should have looked back then. I should look back now. What's waiting? Maybe it's not worse than this. Maybe it's home. Tears blurred the screen. Not my tears. Elias's tears. They felt warm on my cheeks. Aris watched, unmoved, as the words appeared. The dragging sound grew louder in the recording, sinking with the phantom vibration in the floorboards beneath my chair. The smell of wet earth and something sweetly rotten filled the room, stronger than the chemical tang of the warehouse. Aris's face didn't change, just a scientist observing a specimen, or a gardener watching a seed take root in borrowed soil. I kept typing. The shadow touches my arm, cold like the deep water. It doesn't hurt. It remembers. It remembers the cliff. It remembers Rusty. It remembers Clara's voice. It's not taking. It's given back. All the things I buried, all the things I forgot to be strong. The grief isn't a weight anymore. It's water, clear, cold. I am the stone. I am the sea. I am the shadow's child. Let go. Let go. Let. The recording cut to static. My fingers stopped on the keys. The tremor was gone. My hand was steady, calm. The smell of salt and brine was the only scent in the room now. Aris reached over, turned off the recorder. He slid a fresh $100 bill onto the desk beside the keyboard. "Good," he said. His voice was still flat, but there was something else in his eyes now. Not satisfaction, recognition. "The tether is holding, stronger than before. You will return tomorrow. More recordings. Elias has many dreams left to live." I looked down at the money. Crisp, real. But it meant nothing. I looked at my hands on the keyboard. Stronger, weathered, no longer trembling. I flexed them. They felt right. They felt like mine. I thought of the cliff, the stone, the deep, cold water, the shadow that wasn't a monster, but a mirror, a release. The fragmented memories of the life I'd lived before, rent worries, duct-taped laptops, the smell of novelty gnomes, were already fading, like footprints washed away by the tide. Unimportant, temporary. I picked up the $100. Not for me, for the boat fuel, for the new nets, for the small white house on the cliff edge where the wind always carried the scent of sea and pine. Aris nodded once, a silent dismissal. I stood up. My body moved with an unfamiliar ease, a groundedness I'd never known. The warehouse hallway didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like a corridor, a passage. As I walked down the stairs, the dragging sound didn't follow me. It stayed in the sterile room with Eris and the recorder. But the thumping was there, deep, rhythmic, the heartbeat of the sea, of the earth, of the life that had finally found its way home. My boots, his boots, scuffed and salt-stained, made solid, steady sounds on the concrete steps. No tremor, no fear, just the weight of the smooth gray stone in my pocket, and the quiet certainty that the path ahead, however dark, was finally my own. I am Elias. I remember the cliff. I remember the sea. I remember the shadow. And I am not afraid to go back. The city lights blurred outside the grimy lobby window, not as a place I belonged, but as a distant shore I'd already left behind. The salt wind called. I turned towards it, the $100 bill crumpled forgotten in my fist, already dissolving into the tide of a deeper, truer memory. The dream was over. The life had just begun. My reflection started moving before I did. It began with a blink, not mine. I was shaving, 6:17 a.m., steam fogging the mirror, razor hovering just below my left eye, when my reflection blinked. A fraction of a second before I did. I froze. The razor nicked my skin. A bead of blood welled, dark and slow. In the mirror, the same drop appeared. Identical size, identical curve. But it rolled down my reflection's cheek before mine moved. I touched my face. Sticky warmth. Looked back. My reflection's hand was already lowering, smiling faintly, not a grin, not a leer, just a quiet, knowing upturn at the corner of its mouth, like it had just remembered a private joke. I backed away. The mirror, cheap, frameless, glued to the wall of my rented studio, stayed ordinary. No distortion, no fog, just my face pale, stubbled, eyes wide. But the air in the bathroom had changed. Thicker, colder, like stepping into a room where someone had just stopped speaking. I didn't shower, didn't dress. Sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed bathroom door. Told myself, fatigue, sleep paralysis residue. You dreamed it. I'd been having those dreams lately, vivid, suffocating, where I'd wake up inside the dream, convinced I was awake, only to jolt upright hours later, drenched in sweat. Dr. Thorne called it hypnopompic intrusion, the brain misfiring during the transition to wakefulness. But the blood on my collar was real, and the reflection hadn't lagged. It had led. At work, third-floor cubicle, data entry for a medical billing firm, I avoided all reflective surfaces. The chrome trim on the elevator doors, the glass partition of the conference room, even the dark screen of my idle monitor. I kept my head down, typed. Patient. Ramirez, Elena. Procedure. MRI brain. Code 70553. Diagnosis. G43.909. The numbers blurred. I glanced up. Across the aisle, Janice from HR was adjusting. Her scarf in the window of her cubicle, polished steel, part of the modern aesthetic the office manager loved. Her reflection moved. Smooth. Fluid. Too fluid, like it wasn't bound by muscle or tendon. She reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Her reflection's hand was already there, waiting. Janice didn't notice. She smiled at something on her phone and walked away. I stood, walked to her cubicle, looked at the steel panel. My reflection stared back. Same rumpled shirt, same dark circles. But its eyes, not tired, alert. And when I shifted my weight to my left foot, its right foot moved first, a preparatory step, like it was bracing. I turned abruptly, walked fast to the stairwell, pushed the door open. Concrete steps spiraled down. No windows, just emergency lighting, low, red, pulsing faintly. I leaned against the wall, breathed. It's stress, grief. The anniversary's coming. January 7th, 3 years. Sarah's voice on the phone. Ben, I'm at the garage. Something's wrong. The silence after. The Prius empty. The phone playing Hallelujah. I hadn't slept through it. I had. That was the lie I'd lived. I had gone to the garage. I'd seen the man. I'd frozen. And Sarah had gotten into the car with him to protect me. Just go, Ben. Run. I'll be okay. I ran. I didn't look back. I never saw what happened next. The reflection in the stairwell door, reinforced steel, scratched and dented, caught my eye. I turned, looked. It wasn't me. It was him. The man from the garage, tall, gaunt, wearing a dark coat, even in the fluorescent glare. He stood behind me in the reflection, not in the stairwell. In the reflection. His hand rested on my reflection's shoulder. My reflection didn't flinch, just nodded. Once, slow, like an agreement. I spun. Nothing. Empty stairwell. But the air smelled of gasoline and burnt rubber. That night, I didn't go home. I drove west into the desert, past Barstow, past the turnoff for Solitude, until the road became gravel, then dirt, then nothing but hardpan and sagebrush. I parked, killed the headlights. The moon was full, cold, white, casting sharp, ink-black shadows. I got out, walked 100 yards from the Jeep, stopped, turned, looked back. The Jeep's side mirror caught the moonlight. I approached slowly, peered in. My reflection stared back, same face, but its mouth moved, not forming words, just shaping them, silent, lips parting, tongue pressing against teeth like it was tasting the air. Then it raised its hand, not mimicking, initiating. It pointed past my shoulder into the darkness behind me. I didn't turn. I knew. The man was there, not in the world, in the space between. The reflection lowered its hand, touched its own chest, then pointed at me. You. Me. Same. I whispered, "What do you want?" The reflection's lips moved, no sound, but I heard it, not in my ears, in my bones. To be seen. I backed away, drove through the night, reached my building at 3:04 a.m. The lobby was empty. The elevator, no. I took the stairs. 7 flights, legs burning, heart hammering, apartment 7B, key in the lock. I pushed the door open, dark. I flicked the light. The hallway mirror, tall, narrow, inherited with the apartment, stood at the far end. My reflection filled it. But it wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, at the open door, at the darkness beyond, and it was smiling, wide, unnatural, teeth too white, too many. I slammed the door, locked it, chained it, didn't turn on any other lights. Sat on the couch, watched the mirror, it watched back. At 4:17 a.m., the exact time Sarah's phone stopped recording, the reflection moved. Not a blink, not a shift, a step. It stepped forward, out of the mirror, not through the glass, into the glass. The surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and behind it, depth. Not wall, not drywall, a corridor, low ceiling, exposed pipes, red emergency lights, the same corridor from the subway station, the one with the posters. Today, Wednesday, January 7th, 2026. My reflection, Daniel, stood at the far end, wearing a clean lab coat, smiling. He raised a hand, waved, then pointed to the floor beside him. A figure lay there, curled on its side, wearing a floral dress, gloves folded neatly on the concrete. The woman from the saloon. She turned her head, looked at me, not with fear, with pity. The reflection, Daniel, mouthed 2 words. Let go. I stood, walked to the mirror, pressed my palm against the glass, cold, solid, but beneath my hand the surface gave, just slightly, like skin. I pulled back. My palm print remained, not fog, not oil, a perfect, glowing outline, soft amber light, like the tubes in the Philco radio. It pulsed, once, twice, in time with my heartbeat. I looked down. My real hand was unmarked, but the reflection's hand, still pressed to the glass from the other side, was bleeding. Dark drops welled at the fingertips, rolled down the glass, not falling. Climbing, upward, defying gravity, toward the top of the mirror, where, in the corner, faint but growing clearer, words were forming. Scratched into the silvering, not written, carved. You froze, she chose, now choose. The blood reached the words, filled the grooves, glowed red. The reflection, Daniel stepped aside. Behind him, the corridor opened into a room. The MRI suite at MedTech, the machine hummed. The table was extended, and on it, Sarah, eyes closed, chest rising, falling, alive, unharmed. A monitor beeped, steady, strong. Daniel looked at me, then at Sarah, then back. His lips moved. 1 step, that's all it takes, to undo the freeze, to be there, to be him. The man in the dark coat stood in the corner of the room, not threatening, just waiting like a stagehand. The reflection held out its hand, not to pull me in, to invite me, to trade. Benjamin, the name of the man who ran, for Daniel, the name of the man who stayed. I looked at my real hand, at the glowing print on the glass, at Sarah, breathing, at the words still burning. You froze. She chose. Now choose. The apartment was silent. No hum of fridge, no distant traffic, just the low rhythmic thump of the MRI machine, coming from the mirror. Thump, 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 like a heart, like a piston, like something being pumped back to life. I took a breath, not shallow, not panicked, deep, full, the kind you take before diving, before speaking, before changing. I raised my hand, not to the glass, to my chest, felt the ridge of the old scar above my eyebrow, felt the steady beat beneath my ribs. Then I looked the reflection in the eye and shook my head, slowly, deliberately. No, I said. The reflection's smile didn't fade. It shifted from invitation to respect. It lowered its hand, stepped back into the corridor. The woman in the floral dress sat up, nodded. The man in the coat tipped his head. The MRI's hum softened. The words on the glass dimmed, not erased. Acknowledged. The blood drained away. The corridor receded. The mirror became just a mirror. My reflection stared back. Same face, same scar, same green eyes. But the eyes were different, not haunted, not fractured. Present. I turned away, walked to the window, looked out. Dawn was breaking, pale gold over the city. January 7th, 2026. Still today, still now. I picked up my phone, dialed Sarah's number. Not the old one, the real one, the one that had been disconnected for 3 years. It rang, once, twice, then a voice, not a recording, not a ghost. Hers, sleepy, warm, alive with the mundane miracle of morning. Ben, what's wrong? It's 6 a.m. I closed my eyes, heard the rain on the roof, heard the distant wail of a siren, heard the sound of a world still turning. I'm okay, I said. And for the first time in 3 years, I meant it, because the reflection didn't move before I did. I did, and that was the moment everything changed. Not back. Forward. Into the light. My dreams are starting to replace my real memories. It began with the taste of strawberries. Not the bland, watery supermarket kind I usually bought, but the sharp, sun-warmed burst of flavor from the wild patch behind my grandmother's house in Vermont. I hadn't been there since I was 12, yet, standing in my sterile kitchenette, pouring stale coffee into a chipped mug, I could taste them. Vivid, real, the tiny seeds catching between my teeth, the juice running sticky down my chin. I hadn't eaten strawberries in months. The memory hit me with such force I dropped the mug. It shattered on the linoleum, brown liquid spreading like a stain. But the taste lingered, impossibly bright, long after the coffee smell faded. That was the first crack, small, dismissible, a nostalgic glitch. But the cracks widened. A week later, during a tedious Tuesday meeting about quarterly projections, I found myself staring at Dave from accounting's receding hairline and suddenly knew he had a third-floor apartment overlooking the river with a blue balcony. I'd never been to his apartment. I didn't even know he lived near the river. But the image was there. The peeling blue paint on the railing, the smell of damp concrete and exhaust, the sound of gulls crying. Later, in the break room, I mentioned it casually. "Nice place you got over the river, Dave. That blue balcony looks damp." His face went slack. "How did you—" "I just moved there last month. Haven't told anyone." The chill that went through me wasn't just embarrassment. It was the first true flicker of terror. That memory wasn't mine. It wasn't a dream I recalled. It had simply overwritten my knowledge of Dave, seamless and complete. Then came the dreams. Not the usual jumble of anxieties and forgotten faces, but hyper-real, coherent narratives that felt less like sleep and more like time spent elsewhere. In one, I was a lighthouse keeper on a jagged, storm-lashed island. I could feel the grit of salt on my skin, the tremor of the massive lens as it rotated, the specific ache in my lower back from hauling coal up the spiral stairs. I woke with the taste of brine on my lips and the phantom weight of a heavy brass key in my pocket. The next day, I found myself instinctively knowing the maintenance schedule for the old Maritime Museum downtown, a place I'd never visited. The details were precise, specific. The brand of oil used on the Fresnel lens replica, the exact squeak of the third stair on the tower access. The dreams bled into my waking hours faster, fragments, sensations, skills. I found myself humming a tune I'd never heard before, my fingers moving with unfamiliar dexterity over a guitar I didn't own. I knew the precise way to fold a paper crane, though I'd never learned origami. I recognized the constellations of the southern hemisphere, though I'd never left the northern latitudes. Each new dream layer felt richer, more real than my actual life, my cramped apartment, my data entry job, my solitary dinners eaten over reruns of shows I couldn't quite remember enjoying. The real memories started to fray at the edges. I'd reach for a memory, a birthday party, a first kiss, a conversation with my mother, and find it thinner, fainter, like an old photograph left in the sun. The colors bled, the details dissolved, the emotional weight evaporated. But the dream memories gained weight. They felt solid, textured, imbued with a significance my actual life lacked. The lighthouse keeper's loneliness felt more profound than my own. The taste of those wild strawberries more real than any meal I'd eaten in the last year. I tried to fight it. I started a journal, not digital. Something tangible, something the dreams couldn't easily overwrite. Leather-bound, fountain pen. I wrote down everything I could remember about my real life. My street address, my mother's maiden name, the color of my first car, the name of my childhood best friend, the exact layout of my grandmother's house, the real one, not the dream version with the impossible strawberry patch. I wrote about mundane things, the brand of toothpaste I used, the route I took to work, the serial number on my laptop. Anchors. I kept the journal locked in a small safe bolted to the floor of my closet. The first time I opened it after a particularly vivid dream, a week spent as a botanical illustrator in a sun-drenched Parisian garret, sketching rare orchids. I felt sick. The entries were still there, but the handwriting, it was subtly different. The loops were tighter, the strokes more precise, more fluid. It was my hand, but honed, refined, like the hand of the illustrator, and the memories felt distant, like reading about a stranger. The taste of my real toothpaste was a vague concept, while the scent of the orchid ink from the dream was sharp and immediate in my nostrils. Worse, the safe itself felt alien. The cold metal, the click of the combination lock, it triggered a memory of a different safe, hidden behind a false panel in a library in Prague, filled with stolen maps. The Prague memory felt more real than the safe under my own fingers. I stopped opening the journal. The anchors were dragging me down, not holding me fast. The dream lives were brighter, more vivid, more meaningful. Why cling to the gray monotony of Eli Vance, data processor, when I could be Ilara, the lighthouse keeper who spoke to the gulls? Or Matteo, the Parisian illustrator who knew the secret language of flowers? Their memories were clean, unburdened by the petty frustrations and quiet disappointments of my real existence. Their sorrows felt epic, their joys pure. My real life felt like a poorly written draft, while the dream lives were the final, polished manuscript. The replacement accelerated. I'd wake up and have to consciously remember my name, my address, my job. It took effort, like recalling a character from a book I'd read long ago, but the dream identity was immediate, effortless. I'd look in the mirror and see a flicker of Ilara's sharp cheekbones beneath my own tired face, or Matteo's intense dark eyes staring back from my own pale blue ones. My reflection became a stranger wearing a mask I was slowly forgetting how to wear. Then came the night of the storm. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howling like a banshee. I'd just woken from a dream so intense it left me breathless. I was a child again, but not my childhood. I was running through a moonlit forest, barefoot, the needle-strewn earth soft under my feet. I was chasing fireflies, their cold light winking through the ancient pines. I knew the name of every tree, the call of every night bird. I felt a profound, uncomplicated joy, a sense of belonging to the wild, dark world. I woke with tears on my cheeks, the phantom scent of pine resin and damp earth clinging to me. I stumbled to the bathroom, needing water, needing to ground myself in the harsh fluorescent light. I turned on the tap, splashed cold water on my face. When I looked up, the face in the mirror wasn't mine. It was the child from the dream. Wide, dark eyes filled with moonlight and wonder, framed by messy black hair. The face of a child who had never sat in a cubicle, never paid rent, never felt the gnawing emptiness of a life half lived. I screamed. The sound was raw, terrified. I slammed my fist against the mirror. The glass cracked, spiderwebbing out from the point of impact, but the child's face remained unharmed, looking back at me with an expression of gentle sorrow. "It's okay." The child's lips moved, though no sound came from the mirror. "The real world is just a dream you're forgetting. Come home." I backed away, tripping over the bath mat, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers fumbling. I needed to call someone, Chloe, my sister, proof I existed. Proof this world was real. I dialed. It rang and rang and rang. Voicemail. Her cheerful message, "Hey, it's Chloe. Leave a MSG," sounded tinny, artificial, like a recording from another lifetime. I tried Mark from work. Same thing. My landlord, my therapist. All voicemail. All sounding increasingly distant. Their voices flat, devoid of the warmth I thought I remembered. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I ran to the closet, yanking open the safe. The journal lay inside. I grabbed it, flipping frantically to the first page. My anchors, my real life. The handwriting was completely different. Elegant flowing script, not mine, not Ilara's or Mateo's, older. The ink was faded, sepia-toned. The words weren't about data entry or toothpaste brands. They were about the forest, the fireflies, the names of the trees. The safe itself felt warm, like living wood, not cold metal. The lock clicked open with a soft, organic sigh. I sank to the floor, the journal heavy in my lap. The rain outside seemed to soften, becoming the gentle sigh of wind through pine needles. The hum of the city lights outside my window dimmed, replaced by the chirp of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. The sterile smell of my apartment dissolved into the rich, loamy scent of the forest floor. The child's face in the broken mirror was gone. In its place was my own reflection, but transformed. My eyes were dark. My skin seemed to glow with an inner light, my hair tangled with leaves. I looked whole, at peace. The frantic, hollow ache that had been my constant companion for years was simply gone, replaced by a deep, resonant calm. I understood then the dreams weren't replacing my memories. They were correcting them. My real life, the apartment, the job, the loneliness, was the dream, the fragile, desperate fantasy of a soul lost in the wrong world. The forest, the lighthouse, the Parisian garret, those were the true memories. The echoes of who I was meant to be, bleeding through the thin veil of this false reality. The forgetting wasn't a loss, it was a shedding, like a snake sloughing off dead skin. I stood up, the journal fallen from my numb fingers. I walked to the window, not bothering to unlock it. I simply pushed. The glass didn't shatter. It dissolved like mist. Cool, damp air rushed in, smelling of pine and earth and freedom. Below, the rain-slicked street wasn't asphalt. It was a mossy path winding deep into the moon-dappled forest. Fireflies winked in the darkness, beckoning. I stepped onto the windowsill. The city sounds were gone. Only the forest remained. The whispers in the wind weren't my name anymore. They were a welcome, a homecoming. I looked back once at the empty apartment, the cracked mirror, the fallen journal, a life built on sand washing away. Then I stepped out into the night. The ground was soft beneath my bare feet. The air was alive, and the memories, my true memories, floated back to me like leaves returning to the tree. I remembered the taste of moonlight on my tongue, the language of the owls, the secret paths only the fireflies knew. I remembered who I was. The last vestige of Eli Vance's data processor dissolved like morning fog, and I walked into the trees, home at last, the real memories finally whole. I bought a used camera. The last picture was of me sleeping. The scent of a pawn shop is a unique perfume, a layered olfactory history of desperation, forgotten hobbies, and the faint, metallic tang of regret. It's a smell I've always found strangely comforting. I'm a photographer, but not the kind who chases the crisp, sterile perfection of digital. I'm a creature of the darkroom, a lover of film grain, light leaks, and the tangible magic of a silver gelatin print coming to life in a tray of chemicals. I hunt for relics, for cameras with stories baked into their brass and leather. My name is Jacob, and I believe that old lenses see the world differently, that they hold the ghosts of every image they've ever captured. I never imagined how literally true that could be. The shop was a dusty, cluttered cave on a forgotten side street, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't specifically looking for the faded peeling sign that read, "Second Chances." I was killing time, waiting for inspiration to strike, a common affliction since my ex-girlfriend Chloe had moved out 6 months prior, taking the vibrant color palette of our shared life with her and leaving me in a world of muted grays. It was in the back, under a table piled high with defunct VCRs and sad-looking porcelain dolls, that I saw it. It was a Lichtner A7, a beautiful, brutish piece of German engineering from the 1960s. It was a rangefinder, heavy and solid, its black enamel worn to a soft patina on the corners, its lens a single, unblinking cyclops eye. It felt less like a machine and more like a dense, mechanical heart in my hands. The shopkeeper, a man whose face seemed to be made of intersecting wrinkles, gave me a rheumy-eyed look. "That one? Been here for ages," he rasped. "Found it in an estate lot. As is, of course." "Does the shutter work?" I asked, my thumb finding the familiar, satisfying resistance of the film advance lever. He shrugged, a gesture that moved his entire upper body. "Probably. Thing's built like a Panzer tank. $10. It was the kind of deal that makes your heart beat a little faster." I paid the man, feeling a thrill of discovery, a brief, bright spark in the monochrome landscape of my recent life. I took it home to my apartment, a third-floor walk-up with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, the kind of place that's perfect for brooding artists and other assorted cliches. The real surprise came when I opened the back. There was a roll of film still inside. This was the holy grail for a junk shop connoisseur like me. A found history, a tiny orphan time capsule. The film was an old, off-brand black and white. The counter stopped at 24 exposures. I felt a giddy sense of voyeuristic anticipation. Who was the previous owner? What moments had they deemed worthy of capture? My bathroom doubles as my dark room. I sealed the door with a towel, the familiar, comforting darkness enveloping me. The smell of fixer and stop bath was my incense. I went through the ritual, my hands moving with practiced confidence in the dim, ruby glow of a safe light. I unspooled the film, clipped it, and submerged it in the developer. I watched the clock, gently agitating the tank, my mind racing with possibilities. An hour later, the negatives were hanging to dry, a glistening celluloid ribbon of someone else's life. I held 'em up to the light, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and a strange, almost reverent respect. The first 23 pictures were unremarkable. They were the anonymous, slightly melancholic photos of a life lived, a blurry shot of a child on a swing, a close-up of a cat's face, a rain-slicked street at night, the streetlights blooming like soft, ethereal flowers, several overexposed photos of what looked like the interior of an old, cluttered house. They were competent, but lonely. The compositions were slightly off, the subjects always distant. They felt like the work of a ghost, someone observing the world without ever truly participating in it. Then I looked at the last frame, number 24. My breath hitched in my chest. A cold, sharp icicle of dread seemed to pierce my sternum and travel down my spine. I took the negative strip and put it in the enlarger, needing to see it in stark, undeniable black and white. I focused the image, my hand suddenly clumsy and slick with a sweat I hadn't noticed. The image bloomed into life on the photographic paper in the developing tray, a ghost emerging from the chemical ether. It was a picture of me, sleeping, in my bed, in my apartment. The angle was from the foot of the bed, looking towards the headboard. I was on my side, my face half buried in the pillow. The details were so horrifically, intimately correct that my mind buckled under the weight of them. The specific, rumpled way my comforter was bunched up. The book on my nightstand, a collection of poetry Chloe had left behind, its cover clearly legible. The glass of water beside it, even the shadow cast on the wall by my bedside lamp, was perfect, a familiar nightly silhouette. My first thought was that it was a prank, an incredibly elaborate, cruel prank. My mind immediately went to Chloe, but this wasn't her style. She was practical, grounded. She wouldn't know the first thing about developing film, let alone staging something so violating. And we hadn't spoken in months. My other friends? None of them had a key. My second thought was more technical, a double exposure, a bizarre 1-in-a-million fluke where my face had been superimposed over an image of an empty bed. I was a photographer. I knew the science. I could debunk this. I grabbed my loupe and examined the negative again, my heart thumping a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. The grain was consistent. The light source was singular. The shadows were perfect. It was a single, unmodified, horrifyingly real photograph. My apartment, which had always felt like a sanctuary, a shell I could retreat into, suddenly felt violated, porous. The air itself felt thick with a hostile presence. I walked into my bedroom and stood at the foot of the bed, my eyes darting around the room. The perspective matched perfectly. The photographer had been standing right here, in my room, while I slept. Who had owned this camera? And how, in the name of all that was sane and logical, had they taken a picture of me before I had even bought it? The film had been in the camera when I found it. The thought was a paradox, a Mobius strip of impossibility that my rational mind couldn't navigate. That night, sleep was a foreign country I couldn't find a visa for. I sat on my sofa, the lights on, the Lichner A7 on the coffee table in front of me. It wasn't just a camera anymore. It was a witness, an accomplice. It seemed to watch me with its single glass eye, its black body absorbing the light, giving nothing back. I felt a primal, superstitious urge to smash it, to shatter its lens and exorcise whatever malevolent history it held. but I was also a photographer. It was a beautiful object, and a deeper, more frightening part of me needed to understand. I wedged a chair under the doorknob, a flimsy, pathetic defense against an intruder who had seemingly already bypassed all logic and security. Every creak of the old building, every siren in the distant city was the sound of them coming back. I must have eventually drifted off because I woke up with a jolt, my neck stiff. The gray, unforgiving light of dawn filtering through the blinds. The first thing I did was check the chair. It was still there. I was alone. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave with the night. It clung to me like a damp shroud. At my job, a soulless but necessary gig retouching real estate photos, I couldn't focus. I kept seeing movement in the corners of my screen. I'd glance over my shoulder in the office, convinced someone was standing behind me. I spent my lunch break in a frantic, paranoid online search. I typed in Lixner A7 and strange photos. I waded through forums of camera collectors, their posts filled with arcane discussions of shutter speeds and lens coatings. And then I found it. A single cryptic post on an obscure German photography forum dated from 10 years ago. The post was titled Schattenkamera? Shadow Camera? The user, who went by the name Collector88, wrote about a legend associated with a small specific batch of Lixner A7s produced in the winter of 1963. The legend claimed the lenses were made with a new type of quartz-infused glass mined from a strange, geologically unique site in the Black Forest. The cameras, the legend went, didn't just capture light. They captured something else, an echo, a premonition. The post called them Seelenfängers, soul catchers. It mentioned the original designer, a man named Klaus Richter, who had become a recluse and died in a mental asylum, obsessed with the idea that his cameras were showing him pictures of things that hadn't happened yet. The post ended with a chilling single line. There are stories of owners disappearing, leaving behind only the camera and a final, undeveloped roll of film. I felt a wave of nausea. This was insane. Urban legends, internet ghost stories. But the story had the chilling ring of a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. That night, my paranoia graduated to active measures. I bought a new, heavy-duty deadbolt for my door. I installed a cheap, motion-activated webcam on my bookshelf, aimed at my bed. I was turning my home into a fortress, but I felt more vulnerable than ever. I took the Lixner and locked it in a metal footlocker in my closet, as if I could contain its curse through simple physical confinement. For a week, there was nothing. The webcam recorded nothing but 8 hours of me sleeping fitfully. The feeling of being watched began to recede, replaced by the weary, self-mocking thought that I had let a strange coincidence drive me to the brink of a nervous breakdown. I almost convinced myself it was all in my head. Then I came home from work to find the footlocker in my closet open. I stared at it, my blood turning to ice water. The lock was not broken. It was unlocked. I knew with an absolute gut-wrenching certainty that I had locked it, and inside, sitting innocently on a pile of old sweaters, was the Lixner. I backed out of the closet, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Someone had been here, again. But the new deadbolt on my front door was still locked from the inside. The windows were all latched. There was no way in. My eyes fell on the webcam. I scrambled to my laptop, my hand shaking so badly I could barely type my password. I opened the security footage from the day. I fast-forwarded through the long, empty hours of my vacant apartment. Nothing. No movement. No intruders. The footlocker remained closed and locked. I replayed it, watching the timestamp in the corner. Then I saw it. At exactly 3:33 p.m., the video feed flickered. For a single frame, the screen went to black static. When the image returned, a millisecond later, the footlocker was open. It hadn't been opened. It had just become open, as if reality itself had been briefly edited. A single, crucial frame of the film of my life snipped out, leaving a seamless, impossible jump cut. With a sense of dread so profound it felt like I was moving underwater, I picked up the camera. The film counter, which had been at 0, now read 1. A new picture had been taken. I didn't want to see it. Every cell in my body screamed at me to take the camera and throw it into the deepest part of the river. But I had to know. I was a prisoner to this thing, and the only way out was to understand the nature of my cell. Back in the dark room, the ruby light felt less like a comfort and more like the glow of a hellish fire. My hands trembled as I developed the single frame. The image that emerged was worse than the first. It was a picture of me in the shower. The photo was taken through the frosted glass of the shower door, my form a blurry, vulnerable silhouette. But the detail was still cruelly precise. The specific brand of shampoo on the shelf. The small, crescent-shaped scar on my left shoulder. The angle was from inside the small, windowless bathroom. It was a picture of a private, unguarded moment taken by an invisible, impossible voyeur. The camera was no longer just showing me the past. It was actively documenting my present. It was with me, always. The next few weeks were a descent into a private waking nightmare. The pictures kept appearing, one every few days. A single frame would be exposed on whatever roll of film I had in the camera. I tried leaving it empty, but a new, unexposed negative would simply materialize inside it. A picture of me at my desk at work, taken from over my shoulder. A picture of me buying groceries, taken from the other end of the aisle. A picture of me on the phone with my mother, my face etched with a fake, cheerful smile as I lied and told her everything was fine. Each one was a new violation, a new piece of evidence that my life was no longer my own. The photographer was a ghost, a demon, a glitch in the matrix. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was intimately, malevolently connected to the listener. I tried to get rid of it. I drove 40 miles out of the city and threw it into a landfill. I came home, exhausted and relieved, to find it sitting on my pillow. I smashed it with a hammer, the lens shattering, the body dented and broken. The next morning, it was on my kitchen table, fully repaired without a single scratch. It was a part of my life now, a tumorous, malignant growth that I could not excise. I stopped sleeping. I survived on coffee and fear, my eyes bloodshot, my hands in a perpetual state of tremor. My work suffered. My friends called, their voices full of a concern that I could not answer without sounding like a raving lunatic. I was an island, and the waters were rising. The pictures began to change. They were no longer just of me. A photo appeared of Chloe walking down the street, her face a mask of worry. She was walking towards my apartment building. A few hours later, my buzzer rang. It was her. "Jacob, I've been calling you for a week," she said, her voice tight with a mixture of anger and concern. "Are you okay? You look terrible." I couldn't let her in. I spoke to her through the intercom, my voice a ragged croak. telling her I had the flu, that I was fine, that she should go. The hurt in her eyes, even through the tiny, distorted camera, was a physical blow. The camera wasn't just tormenting me. It was using the people I cared about to do it. It was isolating me, turning me into the monster they would all remember. And then the pictures began to show the future. It started with a photo of a broken plate on my kitchen floor, shattered into a dozen pieces. I spent the entire day in a state of high alert, refusing to go near my kitchen cabinets. That evening, as I was making coffee, a sudden, inexplicable tremor shook the building. A low, deep rumble from a passing construction truck on the street below. A plate vibrated off the shelf and shattered on the floor in the exact pattern as the photograph. My blood ran cold. The camera wasn't just a voyeur, it was an oracle, a prophet of mundane and perhaps not so mundane doom. It was showing me a script, a future that was already written, that I was powerless to change. My free will was an illusion. I was just an actor, hitting my marks in a horror movie written by a malevolent mechanical god. I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones like a terminal cancer, that a final photograph was coming. The one that would explain everything, the one that would show me how it all ended. It appeared 3 nights ago. I developed it with the slow, resigned dread of a man walking to the gallows. The image that emerged from the developer was a culmination of all my fears, a perfect, monochrome distillation of the horror that had consumed my life. The perspective was my own. It was a photo taken from my point of view. My own hands were visible in the bottom of the frame, holding the Lixner camera. The camera was pointed down at the floor of my living room. Chloe was lying there, her eyes wide and staring at the ceiling, a dark, spreading stain on the front of her white blouse. In the corner of the frame, I could see the tip of my own shoe, and next to it, on the floor, was a knife. I stared at the photograph, a low, keening sound of pure despair escaping my lips. It wasn't going to just kill me. It was going to use me. It was going to turn me into a murderer. It was going to take the last person I had ever loved and make me destroy her. And it was going to document the act with its cold, passionless, quartz-infused eye. The final photograph wouldn't just be of a death, it would be my confession. I called her. My voice was a frantic, broken thing. Chloe, listen to me. Don't come here. Whatever you do, do not come to my apartment. I don't care what you hear. I don't care if I call you and beg. Stay away. Jacob, what's wrong? She cried. You're scaring me. Let me come over. Let me help you. No, I screamed, and I slammed the phone down. I threw it against the wall, shattering it. I had to break the chain of prophecy. For 2 days, I sat in my apartment, a prisoner of a future I was desperately trying to avoid. I boarded up the door with a hammer and nails. I sat on the floor in the dark, the Lixner in my lap, its cold weight a constant, terrible reminder. I waited. Last night I heard a pounding on my door. Jacob, it's me. The landlord let me into the building. I know you're in there. Please, just let me see you're okay. It was Chloe. My frantic, insane warnings had, of course, had the opposite effect. They had convinced her I was in danger and that she needed to save me. The prophecy was fulfilling itself. The final act was beginning. I could feel it then, a cold, alien sensation seeping into my arms, into my hands. The camera in my lap felt like it was humming, vibrating with a low, hungry energy, an impulse that was not my own told me to stand up, to go to the door, to let her in. I am writing this now, scrawling these words on the back of old photographic prints with a piece of charcoal from my art supplies, because I don't have much time. I can feel my will eroding, my own thoughts being drowned out by a cold, quiet, calculating intelligence that is not mine. It wants the picture. It has been building to this moment, to this perfect, tragic composition. Chloe is still outside my door. She's been talking to me for hours, her voice growing hoarse, pleading with me. And the other voice, the one inside my head, is getting stronger. It's telling me how beautiful the final print will be, the chiaroscuro of the shadows in the room, the tragic, poetic horror of the scene. It's a masterpiece, it tells me, the greatest photograph ever taken. The camera is in my hands now. It feels so heavy. My fingers are moving towards the nails I hammered into the door. I don't want to do it. I am screaming inside my own mind, a silent, unheard shriek. But my body is beginning to move. It's a slow, jerky, puppet-like motion, my muscles obeying a will that is not my own. The entity that lives in this camera, the ghost of Klaus Richter, or whatever ancient, hungry thing he woke up in that forest, it doesn't just capture moments. It creates them. It feeds on them. It feeds on despair. Chloe is calling my name, the name of the man I used to be. My hand is on the first nail. It's cold, sharp. I can see the final picture in my mind's eye, as clear as if it were already developed and hanging on a gallery wall. It is a work of undeniable soul-destroying art, and it will be my last testament. I don't know if I can stop it. I am raising the hammer. All I know is that the shutter is about to click. My neighbor moved out months ago. I still hear him walking above my ceiling. I am an audio engineer by trade. I say this not to brag, but to establish a baseline for what I am about to tell you. I know sound. I know the difference between the settling of a foundation and the compression of a floorboard under a human heel. I know the frequency of a water pipe rattling, usually around 40 hertz, versus the frequency of a knuckle rapping against drywall, closer to 300-400 hertz. I spend my life scrubbing background noise out of podcasts and isolating vocals in messy studio recordings. I trust my ears more than I trust my eyes. And I know that the apartment above me, Unit 5B, has been empty for 84 days. The previous tenant was a man named Arthur Vance. Arthur was a heavy man, both in spirit and in stature. He had a very specific gait. He led with his right heel, striking the floor hard, and then dragged his left foot slightly, a result of a hip surgery he'd told me about in the elevator once. Thud swish, thud swish. That was the soundtrack of my life for 3 years. It was annoying, sure, but it was rhythmic, predictable. It was the heartbeat of the building. Then Arthur died. Heart attack in the kitchen. I didn't find him, but I heard him fall. A singular, massive impact that shook the light fixture in my hallway. Then silence. 2 days later, the smell alerted the super. They cleared the place out in October. I watched the movers take the furniture. I watched the cleaning crew haul out the trash bags. I watched Mrs. Gable, the landlady, lock the deadbolt and put the key in her purse. She told me she was going to renovate the place, strip it down to the studs, modernize it before renting it out again. "It'll be empty for months, Elias," she promised me. "Enjoy the quiet." I did. For the first month, the silence was luxurious. I worked from home in a sound-treated spare bedroom I call the booth. Having absolute silence from upstairs meant I could lower my noise gate thresholds. I could work without headphones. It was bliss. The sound started on a Tuesday in November. It was 2 a.m. I was in the booth, editing a dialogue track for a horror anthology podcast, ironically enough. I had the monitors turned down low. Thud swish. My hand froze on the mouse. It was faint, muffled by the layer of insulation and drywall, but unmistakable, directly above my head. Thud swish. I spun my chair around and looked up at the acoustic foam tiles on my ceiling. I held my breath. The building, the St. Jude Arms, is old. Built in the 1920s, it groans, it shifts in the wind, but pipes don't walk, radiators don't limp. Thud swish, thud swish. It was walking from the area directly above my office, which would be the second bedroom in 5B, toward the kitchen. I stood up, taking off my headphones. I walked out of my office and into my hallway, following the trajectory of the sound. The footsteps were heavy. This wasn't a rat. This wasn't a settling beam. This was a mass of at least 200 pounds moving across the floorboards. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the ceiling. The footsteps stopped right above where Arthur's stove used to be. Hello? I felt stupid saying it. Silence. I grabbed my broom, the classic tenant weapon, and banged the handle against the ceiling 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. Usually, if it's a squatter or a new tenant being loud, they stop. They realize the walls are thin, but the response wasn't silence. Bang, bang, bang. 3 knocks came back. From the floor above, right above my head. But they didn't sound like a foot stomping. They sounded like a knuckle. A hard, bony knuckle rapping against the floorboards. I lowered the broom. My skin went cold. To knock on the floor like that, someone would have to be lying down or crawling. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the TV on mute, listening. The walking continued for an hour, pacing back and forth, from the kitchen to the bedroom, over and over again. Thud swish. The next morning, at 8 a.m. sharp, I called Mrs. Gable. "Elias, honey, you're imagining things," she said, her voice raspy with the first cigarette of the day. "I was just there yesterday to check the heat. The place is empty, locked up tight." "Mrs. Gable, someone is in there. I heard them pacing all night. I heard them knock back at me." She sighed. "Look, maybe it's the pipes. The boiler's acting up, or maybe rats. Big city rats sound like dogs sometimes." "Rats don't walk with a limp," I snapped. "Please, just check it." She agreed to meet me at noon. We went up to the 5th floor together. The hallway smelled of old carpet and lemon cleaner. She unlocked the door to 5B. The hinges squealed. The apartment was a shell. No furniture, no curtains, just bare hardwood floors covered in a thin film of gray dust. "See?" Mrs. Gable gestured to the empty expanse. "Empty." I walked in. My footsteps echoed loudly in the hollow space. I walked to the spot in the kitchen where I had heard the knocking. I looked at the floor. The dust was undisturbed. That was the moment the real fear set in. If there had been a squatter, there would be footprints, scuff marks, trash. But the layer of dust was pristine, smooth as a frozen lake, except for the tracks I was currently making. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I heard him. It sounded exactly like Arthur." Mrs. Gable frowned and crossed herself. "Don't speak ill of the dead, Elias. Arthur is gone. It's just the building settling. Old buildings have a memory, you know. Echoes." She ushered me out and locked the door. I went back downstairs, feeling like I was losing my mind. I sat in my studio and stared at the waveform on my screen. I decided that if I was going to be haunted, I was going to treat it like a technical problem. I was going to capture it. That night, I set up my gear. I took 2 high-sensitivity shotgun microphones and mounted them on boom stands, pressing the capsules almost against the ceiling in the hallway. I ran the cables into my interface and armed a recording track in Pro Tools. I put on my best pair of noise-canceling headphones, cranked the gain, and waited. For 3 hours, I heard nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the distant siren of a police car. Then, at 2:13 a.m., the waveform spiked. Thud! Swish! It was so loud in my headphones I flinched. It sounded clearer, heavier than before. I watched the spectral analyzer, the visual representation of the sound frequencies. The low end was massive, 40 hertz to 100 hertz. That's the sound of impact, the sound of weight. The footsteps started in the bedroom above. They walked to the center of the living room and stopped. I held my breath, watching the recording line scroll across the screen. Then I heard a voice. It wasn't speaking to me. It was muffled, sounding like it was coming through water. I boosted the high frequencies. I applied a compressor to bring up the quiet sounds. Keys! My stomach dropped. It was a man's voice, low, gravelly. Where are the keys? I recognized the voice. It was Arthur, but it sounded wrong. It sounded looped, like a recording skipping. Where are the keys? Then a sound that made me rip the headphones off my head. A scream, but not a human scream. It sounded like metal shearing, like a structural beam twisting and snapping, but it had the cadence of a vocal cord. It lasted for 6 seconds, peaking the meters into the red, distorting the audio. Then, silence. I sat there, trembling. I played the audio back. The footsteps were there. The voice was there. The scream was there. I wasn't crazy, but the dust upstairs had been undisturbed. The next few days were a blur of sleep deprivation. The sounds evolved. It wasn't just walking anymore. It was activities. On Thursday, I heard marbles rolling across the floor, hundreds of them. A distinct clack, clack, clack roll sound. On Friday, I heard furniture being dragged, heavy wooden furniture scraping against the floorboards. I heard a chair scrape, a pause, and then scrape again. I went back up to 5B on Saturday. I didn't call Mrs. Gable this time. I used a credit card to shim the lock. It was terrifyingly easy. I pushed the door open. The apartment was still empty. The dust was still there. But this time, the dust wasn't pristine. In the center of the living room, the dust had been disturbed, but not by feet. It looked like something had slithered. A wide serpentine trail cut through the gray powder, winding from the bedroom to the kitchen. It was about 2 feet wide, and in the middle of the trail, at irregular intervals, were indentations. They looked like fingers, long, dragging fingers. I backed out of the apartment, locking the door behind me. I went downstairs and barricaded my door. I started doing research on the building. The St. Jude Arms was built in 1924. Before that, it was a tenement house that burned down in 1902. Tragedy, death, the usual ghost story fodder. But that didn't explain the physicality of the sounds. Ghosts don't have mass. They don't generate 50 hertz thuds. On Sunday night, the ceiling started to leak. I was in the kitchen when a drop of dark, viscous liquid landed on my counter. I looked up. There was a stain spreading across the white plaster right above the island. It wasn't water. It was brownish red and smelled like copper and spoiled meat. I grabbed a ladder. I poked the wet plaster with a broom handle. The drywall was soft, too soft. With a wet crunch, the broom handle went straight through the ceiling. Debris rained down on me, plaster, dust, and clumps of insulation. I coughed, waving the dust away. I shone my flashlight up into the hole I had just made. I expected to see the underside of the floorboards of apartment 5B. The space between my ceiling and the neighbor's floor is usually about 12 inches, just joists and pipes. But the beam of my flashlight didn't hit floorboards. It went up and up. I squinted, climbing a step higher on the ladder. There were no floorboards above me. Through the hole in my ceiling, I could see another room. But it wasn't apartment 5B. It was a vertical shaft, an impossible space. It looked like the interior of a silo, lined with rotting wood and rusting pipes that crisscrossed like a chaotic spiderweb. And clinging to the pipes about 10 feet up in this impossible void was a figure. It was shaped like a man, but the proportions were all wrong. The limbs were too long, possessing too many joints. The skin was gray and translucent, pulled tight over bone. It was wearing tatters of what looked like a suit, Arthur's suit. It was hanging upside down, its feet hooked over a rusty steam pipe like a bat. Its head swiveled 180 degrees to look down at me. The face was Arthur's face, but it was slack, like a rubber mask that had melted in the sun. The mouth hung open, unhinged, revealing rows of small needle-like teeth that no human should have. It didn't speak, it mimicked. From that hanging, open maw came the sound of my own voice, perfectly recorded and played back. "Mrs. Gable, someone is in there." It was my voice from the phone call. Then it shifted. It played the sound of my keyboard typing, click, clack, click. Then the sound of my breathing as I slept, a rhythmic, wet rasp. I fell off the ladder. I scrambled backward across the kitchen floor, slipping on the plaster dust. The thing in the ceiling unhooked one leg. It began to descend, moving through the impossible vertical space, navigating the pipes with sickening grace. It was coming down into my apartment. I ran. I didn't pack a bag. I grabbed my keys and my wallet, and I bolted out the door. I could hear the thud swish of it landing on my kitchen floor as I slammed the front door. I'm writing this from an internet cafe 3 blocks away. I've been here for 4 hours. I pulled up the blueprints of the building online. The city archives. There is no crawl space. There is no shaft. Between 4B and 5B, there is only 12 inches of wood and plaster. But I know what I saw. I just got a notification on my phone. It's from my home security app. The one connected to the camera in my living room, motion detected. I shouldn't look. I know I shouldn't look. I tapped the notification. The feed loaded. My apartment is dark. But in the center of the living room, standing in front of the camera, is the figure. It's wearing my clothes. It's wearing the hoodie I left on the chair. It's staring into the lens. And it's holding a sign. It must have written it on the back of one of my work scripts. The handwriting is jagged, scratchy. It says, "I moved out. Now you move in." It dropped the sign. It's walking toward the front door. I can hear footsteps coming from the street outside the cafe. Thud, swish. Thud, swish. They're getting louder. I think I'm going to stay in the bathroom. If you find this, check the ceiling. Don't trust the silence. The silence is just them listening to learn your voice. I signed a lease that listed my death date as the move-out day. The rain was coming down in icy needles when I saw the sign taped to the lamppost. Apartment for rent, $450 a month, utilities included, immediate occupancy. Inquire within. The address was 7B Willow Street, a narrow 3-story brick building wedged between a shuttered laundromat and a pawn shop in a part of town where the streetlights flickered like dying fireflies. My savings had evaporated after the layoff. My cousin's couch smelled permanently of stale beer and regret. This price was impossible, a miracle, or a trap. I was too cold and too tired to care. The front door opened before I could knock. A man stood there, maybe 60, with skin like crumpled tissue paper and eyes that held no light. He wore a threadbare cardigan despite the damp chill. "You're late," he said, his voice dry as dead leaves. No greeting, no name, just a slow blink that seemed to last too long. He gestured me inside without, stepping aside, forcing me to squeeze past him into a dim foyer, smelling of mildew and something faintly metallic like old pennies. "Mr. Silas," he finally offered, leading me up a narrow staircase carpeted in threadbare burgundy. The steps groaned underfoot. "Apartment 2B, top floor, quiet building, good tenants." He didn't look at me as he spoke. His gaze drifted past my shoulder, down the hall toward a door marked "Basement, Keep Out." The apartment was small but clean. 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen with a humming refrigerator, a living room with a single window overlooking the rain-slicked alley. The walls were bare plaster, yellowed with age. The air held that same metallic tang, undercut by lemon cleaner. It was cheap, it was bleak, it was all I could afford. "The lease," Mr. Silas said, placing a single sheet of paper on the chipped kitchen table. He produced a cheap ballpoint pen from his cardigan pocket. "Sign here." He pointed to a line at the bottom. "And here for the move-out date." I scanned the document. Standard clauses about noise, pets, security deposit. The rent amount was correct. Then I saw it. Under lease term, it read, "Commencement date, October 27th, 2023. Termination date, November 19th, 2023. I frowned. "This says I have to move out in 3 weeks? The ad said immediate occupancy. I need at least 6 months. Mr. Silas didn't react. "That's the date," he said flatly. "Sign it." I flipped the page. On the back, under special conditions, was a handwritten addendum in spidery blue ink. "Tenant agrees to vacate premises by 11:59 p.m. on the termination date listed above, regardless of circumstance. Failure to comply voids all tenant rights and forfeits security deposit to the estate." Below it, in smaller script, "The termination date is non-negotiable. It is fixed. It is final." A cold prickle ran down my spine. This is weird. What's the big deal about November 19th? Mr. Silas finally looked at me. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless. "It's the date you die," he said softly. "That's when you move out." I laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that echoed in the small room. "Right. Very funny. Look, I need this place. I'll sign the standard lease. We can fix the date later." He didn't smile, didn't blink. "Sign it as written, or leave. The apartment won't rent to anyone else. It's waiting for you." The rain lashed against the window. My clothes were soaked through. The thought of another night in my car parked under a flickering streetlight made my stomach clench. It was probably a sick joke, a typo. Desperation is a powerful eraser of red flags. I picked up the pen. The plastic was cold. I signed my name, Elena Vasquez. On the first line, my hand was steady. For the move-out date, I wrote November 19th, 2023, exactly as printed. The ink bled slightly into the cheap paper. Mr. Silas watched my hand. his breath shallow, almost imperceptible. When I handed him the pen, his fingers brushed mine. They were ice cold. "Welcome home, Elena," he whispered. He took the lease, folded it neatly, and tucked it into his cardigan. "Keys on the hook by the door. Rent's due the first, no exceptions." He turned and walked out without another word. His footsteps made no sound on the stairs. I locked the door behind him. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy thunk. The apartment felt suddenly smaller, colder. I ran a hand over the kitchen counter. It came away damp, not with water, with a thin, greasy film that smelled faintly of pennies. I scrubbed it with a dishcloth, but the smell clung to my skin. That night, I slept fitfully on the bare mattress I'd hauled up the stairs, the metallic odor thick in the air, the rain a steady drumbeat on the roof. I dreamed of a clock with no hands, ticking backward. The next morning, the smell was gone. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting warm stripes on the floor. The apartment looked ordinary, livable. I unpacked my few boxes, hung clothes in the closet, placed my mother's photo on the nightstand. Normalcy settled like dust. I almost convinced myself the lease was a stress-induced hallucination. Almost. At noon, I went to the bodega down the street for groceries. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes and a gold tooth, scanned my items silently. As I handed him cash, he glanced at my receipt. His gaze flicked to my face, then back to the paper. He hesitated. Miss, your receipt. The date's wrong." I took it, printed at the bottom. "Transaction date, October 27th, 2023. Expiry, November 19th, 2023. My blood turned to slush. "It's a mistake," I said, my voice tight. "A system glitch." The clerk shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Happens sometimes. Weird, though." "That date?" He trailed off, wiping the counter with excessive focus. I left quickly, the bag of groceries heavy in my hand. Back in the apartment, I dug out my phone, scrolled through my photos. My sister's birthday party last month, my work ID, my driver's license renewal confirmation, every digital timestamp read expires November 19th, 2023. I called my bank. The automated system greeted me, then added in a cheerful synthetic voice, "Your account will be deactivated on November 19th, 2023. Thank you for banking with us." I slammed the phone down. My hands were shaking. I checked my email, subscription renewals, utility bills, even a spam message about penis enlargement. All set to terminate on November 19th. My breath came in short gasps. It's a virus, a mass system error. But deep down, I knew. Mr. Silas hadn't been joking. I needed proof. It was just me. I went to the public library, the only place with free computers that didn't require an account. At a terminal in the corner, I searched my own name. Elena Vasquez obituary, November 19th, 2023. No results. Relief washed over me. Then I tried Elena Vasquez death certificate. Still nothing. I leaned back, shaky, but calmer. See? Paranoia, stress, the cheap apartment playing tricks on your mind. I closed the browser, ready to leave. The screen flickered, the library homepage vanished. In its place, stark white text on a black background, Elena Vasquez Daube, April 12, 1990. Doe, November 19th, 2023. Cause, cardiac arrest, undiagnosed condition. Next of kin, Maria Vasquez, sister. Final residence, 7B Willow Street, apt 2B. The words burned into my retinas. My vision blurred. I hadn't told anyone about the faint chest pains I'd been having, the dizzy spells, the way my heart sometimes stuttered like a skipping record when I climbed stairs. I'd chalked it up to stress, to cheap coffee, to the exhaustion of job hunting, but I'd scheduled a doctor's appointment for next week. A secret, shameful fear I carried alone. How could this know? How could he know? I ran home in the gathering dusk, rain soaking through my jacket again. I fumbled with the key, my fingers numb. Inside, the metallic smell was back, stronger now, mixed with the scent of damp plaster. I tore through my duffel bag, found the crumpled printout from my last physical, a clean bill of health from 6 months ago. I smoothed it on the kitchen table, my hands trembling. The date stamp in the corner read, "Valid until November 19th, 2023. Below the doctor's signature, handwritten in blue ink, no known cardiac issues. Yet, I screamed. The sound died instantly in the thick air. I grabbed a table leg, ready to flip it, to smash something, to prove this wasn't real. My hand slipped on the greasy film. I fell to my knees, gasping. The apartment wasn't just a place, it was a countdown, a tomb with a lease agreement. I looked around wildly. The yellowed walls seemed to pulse. The window glass was fogged, not with condensation, but with a thin, greasy sheen that blurred the city lights outside. I wiped it with my sleeve. For a second, the glass cleared. My reflection stared back, but behind me, in the room, stood Mr. Silas. Not a reflection. He was there, standing silently near the bedroom door, his hands clasped in front of him, his pale eyes fixed on me. I spun around. The room was empty. Only the smell of pennies and the relentless ticking of the cheap wall clock I'd hung that morning. Tick-tock, tick-tock. November 19th was 16 days away. 16 days. I sat on the floor, my back against the damp wall, and counted them on my fingers. 16 days to find a new place. 16 days to escape. But where would I go? My credit was ruined. My references were non-existent. Every application required proof of income I didn't have. I thought of sleeping in my car again, of the cold seeping into my bones, of the fear of tapping on the window in the dead of night. This apartment, this lease, was the only shelter I had, even if it was a death warrant. Days bled together. I stopped answering my phone, ignored texts from my sister. The metallic smell was constant now, a taste like blood on my tongue. Food lost its flavor. Sleep was a battleground. Every night, the dreams returned, not of clocks, of him, Mr. Silas, standing at the foot of my bed in the moonlight, holding a brass key, not the key to the apartment, a larger key, old and heavy, etched with symbols that hurt to look at. He never spoke, just waited. His breath made no cloud in the cold air. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the taste of pennies thick in my mouth. The wall clock's tick-tock, echoing the frantic hammering of my own heart. I avoided the basement door like a live wire. But one rainy afternoon, delivering a package to the elderly woman in 1A, the building's only other tenant, who moved with the slow care of someone already halfway to the grave, I saw Mr. Silas emerge from the basement stairwell. He wasn't carrying anything. His cardigan was dry, despite the downpour outside, and he wasn't alone. A shadow clung to him, a deeper patch of darkness that didn't belong to the dim hallway, a shape that flowed like oil around his ankles before dissolving as he closed the basement door. The old woman shuffled past me without a word, her eyes wide and vacant, fixed on the ceiling. On the 12th day, the chest pain struck while I was washing dishes, sharp, sudden, like a fist closing around my heart. I dropped the plate. It shattered on the floor, shards skittering across the greasy tiles. I slid down the cabinet, gasping, pressing a hand to my sternum. The pain ebbed slowly, leaving me trembling, sweat soaking my shirt. When I looked up, Mr. Silas was standing in the kitchen doorway. He hadn't knocked, hadn't used a key. He just appeared. "You felt it," he stated, not a question. His voice was softer than before, almost gentle. "The first warning, it won't be the last." "Get out," I whispered, my voice raw. "This is my apartment. My lease doesn't give you the right to just—" "The lease gives me all rights," he interrupted calmly. He stepped into the kitchen, his slippers silent on the broken ceramic. He didn't look at the mess. His pale eyes held mine. "It always has? Since the first tenant? Since the house was built on the old graveyard? The ground remembers what the living forget. It hungers for the fixed points, the known endings." He knelt beside me, his cardigan brushing the damp floor. Up close, he smelled of dust and that metallic tang, but underneath it, the faint, sweet rot of damp earth. "You were always going to die on November 19th, Elena. The heart condition was always there, silent, patient, like the house, like me. The lease didn't set the date, it revealed it. It made the fixed point tangible, acceptable." I recoiled. "You're insane. I'm leaving. Tonight." He didn't move. "Where will you go? The shelters are full. Your car's transmission is failing. You heard the grinding this morning. The cold will kill you faster than the heart. Here, you have warmth, food, a bed, and 16 days of peace. 16 days to make your peace." He reached out, not touching me, but smoothing the greasy film on the floor with his fingertip. "The house doesn't want you to suffer. It wants you to come home, to the fixed point, to rest." I spent the next 3 days packing in my duffel bag, unpacking it, packing it again. I called every shelter, every friend, every distant relative. No room, no help. My car sputtered ominously on the drive to the mechanic. He shook his head. "Transmission shot. Minimum 600 to fix. Maybe more." I sat in the driver's seat in the rain. The wipers squeaked uselessly against the downpour, the metallic taste thick on my tongue. Mr. Silas was right. There was nowhere to go, nowhere but to be. On the 15th day, November 18th, I sat at the kitchen table. The greasy film covered everything, the chairs, the counter, the window panes. It smelled strongly of pennies and wet soil. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. The chest pains came and went like phantom footsteps. I wrote a letter to my sister, told her I loved her, apologized for the worry, explained about the heart, the apartment, the impossible lease. I sealed it in an envelope, addressed it, and placed it on the damp counter. My hands were steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a hollow, heavy calm. The house had worn me down. It had seeped into my bones, this place, into my blood. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like the only truth left. Dusk fell early. The streetlights outside flickered once, then died, plunging the alley into darkness. Only the moonlight through the grimy window lit the room, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to pool and flow like the greasy film on the floor. I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. No knock. The key turned in the lock, a sound I'd never heard before, as if the lock had been waiting for this exact moment. Mr. Silas stepped inside. He wasn't alone. 2 figures stood behind him in the hallway, shrouded in shadow. Tall, still. Their outlines seemed to ripple in the dim light, as if made of smoke and damp earth. Mr. Silas carried a small oil lamp. Its flame cast a warm, flickering glow that didn't touch the shadows behind him. He placed the lamp on the table, next to my unopened letter. The flame reflected in his pale eyes. "It's time to prepare, Elena," he said softly. His voice held no menace, only a deep, ancient sorrow. "The house is ready. We are ready." I didn't ask who we was. I didn't need to. The two figures in the hallway stepped forward, flowing into the lamplight. They wore old-fashioned suits, threadbare at the elbows. Their faces were indistinct, blurred like faces seen through rain-streaked glass. But their eyes held the same pale blue emptiness as Mr. Silas's. They moved without sound. One carried a simple wooden chair, the other a length of thick braided rope. They placed the chair in the center of the living room under the bare light bulb. The rope was looped neatly over one arm. They didn't look at me, didn't speak. They simply waited, standing motionless like statues carved from shadow and damp. Mr. Silas picked up my letter. He didn't read it. He tucked it into his cardigan pocket. "She'll get it tomorrow," he said, as if explaining to the shadows, "when the new tenant arrives." He turned to me. "It's easier this way, Elena. No ambulance sirens, no strangers poking at your body, no fear in the dark. You'll slip away quietly, as you were meant to. The house will hold you. It will remember you." He gestured to the chair. "Sit. It's almost time." I didn't resist. My legs carried me forward. The chair was cold, solid, real. I sat. The rope lay coiled on the floor like a sleeping serpent. One of the shadow men stepped forward. His fingers, when they touched my shoulder, were colder than Mr. Silas's, dry, unyielding. He lifted the rope, not roughly, carefully, reverently. He looped it over the light fixture, a heavy brass hook screwed into the ceiling beam. The rope hissed as it slid through his hands. The other shadow man produced a small, worn step stool. He placed it before me. Mr. Silas knelt beside the chair. His face was level with mine. The lamplight caught the tears welling in his pale blue eyes. Real tears. "It's not cruel," he whispered. "It's mercy. The world outside is hard, uncertain. Here you have an ending, a fixed point. No more wondering when, no more fear of the unknown, just rest." He took my hand. His skin was like cold parchment. "We've been waiting for you, Elena, since 1898, since the first tenant. The house remembers every fixed point. Every heart that stopped on its appointed day, we keep them safe. We keep them known." The clock on the wall ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock. November 19th had begun, midnight. The date on the lease, my death date. The shadow man holding the rope nodded slowly. It wasn't a human nod. It was the settling of dust, the shifting of earth. I looked at the rope, at the hook, at Mr. Silas's tear-streaked face, at the two silent guardians of the fixed points. The metallic smell was overwhelming now, mixed with the scent of old wood and damp soil. It didn't smell like death. It smelled like coming home, like the deep, quiet dark beneath the roots of ancient trees, like the end of a long, hard road. I stood up. My legs didn't shake. I placed my foot on the step stool. The wood was cold. The shadow man adjusted the rope around my neck. It wasn't tight, just a presence, a promise. Mr. Silas held my hand until the last moment. His grip was firm, comforting. The lamplight flickered, casting our shadows, mine, Mr. Silas's, and the two guardians, dancing huge and distorted on the yellowed walls. For a second, the shadows didn't match our shapes. They were taller, older, rooted deep in the floorboards. The house sighed around us, a deep, settling sound in the walls, in the floor, in my bones. It was ready. I was ready. "It's okay, Elena," Mr. Silas whispered, his breath warm against my ear despite his cold skin. "Let go. The fixed point is here. It's time to come home." I stepped off the stool. The rope held. The last thing I saw wasn't darkness. It was the lamplight catching the tears on Mr. Silas's cheeks as he watched me go. The last thing I heard wasn't the creak of the rope. It was the house breathing, a deep, contented sigh that vibrated through the floorboards, up through the rope, and into my stilling heart. The metallic taste was gone, replaced by the scent of lavender and old paper, the scent of peace. The clock on the wall stopped ticking. Outside, the streetlights flickered back on one by one as dawn began to bleed into the sky over Willow Street. In apartment 2B, the greasy film on the surfaces slowly dissolved, leaving the room clean, quiet, and empty. On the kitchen table, the oil lamp burned low. Beside it lay a single brass key and a sealed envelope addressed to Maria Vasquez. Mr. Silas picked up the key. He placed it gently on the envelope. He didn't lock the door as he left. He knew it wasn't necessary. The house would keep its promise. It always did. The new tenant would arrive at noon. The lease was already drawn up. The move-out date was already written, fixed, final. The house remembered. The house waited. It always waited. The streetlights hummed. The city woke up. Apartment 2B held its breath, waiting for the next fixed point, the next homecoming, the next name on the lease, the next soul who needed an ending. I am gone. I am home. The fixed point is reached. The rope is still. The house is quiet. I am not afraid. I am known. I am remembered. I am home. Forever. The lamp flame sputters. Darkness returns. The house sleeps. It dreams of keys. It dreams of fixed points. It dreams of home. It waits, always waits, for the next Elena, for the next fixed point, for the next death date on the lease. The streetlights hum. The city breathes. The house holds its breath, waiting, always waiting. The key is cold on the envelope. The date is clear. November 19th, 2023. My date, my home, my end, my peace. I am home. I am gone. I am fixed. I am free. The darkness is warm. The rope is a memory. The house sighs and waits. I remember dying, but everyone says I'm fine. The shower water should have been hot, scalding, enough to burn the memory of ice water out of my bones. But it wasn't. It ran lukewarm and thin from the faucet, the same weak pressure that had plagued this apartment since I moved in after Clara left. I stood under it shivering, scrubbing my arms raw. My left forearm wouldn't clean. No matter how hard I scrubbed, how much soap I used, the skin remained stained a faint watery blue, like drowned flesh. And when the steam thickened, curling around me like grave mist, I could still feel it. The crushing weight of the river current, the shocking cold as it filled my mouth, the desperate flail of my legs against the muddy bottom as my lungs burned. I remembered the exact moment the world went silent, the bubbles rising past my face, silver and fragile, the streetlights above the water's surface, blurred and distant like stars in a dream. The thought that cut through the panic, sharp and final. This is how I die. I turned off the water. The dripping echoed in the tiny bathroom. I toweled off slowly, avoiding the mirror. I didn't need to see the hollows under my eyes, the grayish pallor that clung to my skin no matter how much I slept. I knew what was there. I dressed in the bedroom, pulling on clean sweatpants and a t-shirt. The blue stain on my forearm had faded to a ghostly watermark, barely visible, just like the memory everyone insisted wasn't real. Downstairs, Mrs. Gable was feeding pigeons on her stoop. Her laundromat smelled of damp cotton and industrial soap. She beamed when she saw me. "Eli, you look better today. Color in your cheeks." Her eyes were sharp behind her thick glasses, missing nothing. The tremor in my hands, the way I gripped the railing too tightly. I forced a smile. "Just tired, Mrs. Gable?" "Bad dreams." She patted my arm. "Honey, you haven't slept at all since that little tumble last week. Finch said you slipped on the fire escape, hit your head something awful. Lucky you landed in the bushes." Her voice dropped, conspiratorial. "Heard the ambulance sirens myself, scared the daylights out of me, but you bounced back quick, like a cat." She chuckled, offering me a stale cookie from her pocket. "No broken bones, no concussion. Doctor said it was a miracle." I took the cookie, nodded. A miracle. The word tasted like river mud. I hadn't slipped on the fire escape. I'd jumped, or rather, he had jumped. The man who lived in this body before the water took him. Before I woke up in the hospital bed, tubes in my arms, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging my nose, and a doctor with calm eyes telling me, "You're safe now, Mr. Vance. You fell, but you're fine, perfectly fine." I'd known it was a lie before the words were fully out. The memories weren't of falling. They were of sinking, of giving up, of the river pulling me down into its cold, dark embrace, while the city lights glittered like indifferent stars above. I walked to work. Data Key Solutions. Cubicle 4B. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound that used to be background noise. Now it felt like the river's roar, muffled but insistent. Brenda from HR intercepted me at the coffee machine. "Eli, glad you're back. We've all been so worried." Her smile was perfect, professional. Her eyes flickered over my face, cataloging. "Dr. Evans called this morning. He's pleased with your progress. Said the dissociative episode was severe, but the new meds are working." She slid a manila folder across the counter. My employee file opened to a page stamped. "Medical leave. Approved. Dates circled October 12th to October 19th. Today was October 20th. "Just a fall, sweetie," she repeated, her voice syrupy with concern. "You blacked out. Hit your head. It's understandable you'd have some vivid dreams. Trauma does that." She patted my hand. Her touch was warm, real. But the memory of icy water closing over my head was more real. I remembered the weight of my soaked clothes dragging me down, the panic as my foot snagged on a submerged branch. The last thought before the darkness took me, let go. It's easier to let go. I spent the day inputting insurance claims. Numbers blurred on the screen. Every time I blinked, I saw bubbles rising. The coppery taste of fear flooded my mouth. At lunch, Mark from accounting slid into the booth across from me in the break room. "Dude, you okay? You look like hell." I stared at my sandwich, turkey and avocado on rye. Clara's favorite. I hadn't eaten avocado in years. "I remember dying, Mark," I said quietly, the words scraping my throat raw. "In the river, last Tuesday night. I jumped off the bridge." Mark's smile froze. Then it crumpled into pity. "Whoa, heavy. Finch told us you had a bad fall off the fire escape. Concussion, maybe? Dr. Evans said." "I didn't fall off the fire escape." The words came out too loud. Heads turned. Mark leaned in, voice low, urgent. "Eli, listen. Finch called the cops. They found you curled up at the base of the Sycamore Street Bridge at 3 a.m. You were dry. Your shoes were clean. No mud, no river smell. Just confused, shaking, talking about water." He squeezed my arm. "The river's 3 blocks away. The bridge railing's 8 feet high. You'd have broken bones. You have nothing, not a scratch." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, slid it toward me. A photo. Me, sitting on a gurney under the bridge lights. My clothes were dry. My hair was neatly combed. My face was pale, terrified but unmarked. No water in my clothes, no mud on my shoes, just Eli Vance looking lost. "See? You were never in the water. It was a nightmare, a bad one, but it wasn't real." I stared at the photo. My own face stared back, hollow-eyed, yes, but dry, unharmed. The blue stain on my forearm was hidden under my sleeve. I remembered the cold metal of the gurney under my palms. I remembered the EMT's voice. "Easy now. You're safe. Just a fall." But I also remembered the water filling my lungs. The 2 memories clashed like broken glass in my skull. Which was the dream? The dry gurney under the bridge lights, or the suffocating dark of the river bottom? The copper taste surged back, thick and metallic. I pushed the phone away. "I remember the cold," I whispered. "I remember the bubbles." Mark's expression hardened. "Dr. Evans says that's the dissociation talking, the brain protecting itself from the trauma of the fall, creating a narrative to explain the fear." He stood up, gathering his lunch. "Get checked again, Eli, seriously. This isn't healthy. You're scaring people." He walked away. The break room chatter resumed, but glances thrown my way were different now, warier, pitying. I saw Brenda watching from her office doorway. Her smile was tight, professional. She made a small, deliberate motion with her finger against her temple. Crazy. I left work early. The city streets felt alien, too bright, too loud. The roar of buses, the shriek of brakes, the blare of car horns, it all blurred into the sound of rushing water. I found myself walking toward the river, not the Sycamore Street Bridge where they'd found me dry, the old stone footbridge near the Botanical Gardens, where I'd jumped, where I'd died. The afternoon sun glinted off the slow-moving water. Couples strolled hand in hand. Joggers panted past. No one looked twice at the man standing rigidly on the bridge, hands gripping the cold stone railing. I leaned out, looked down. The water was murky green, swirling around pilings crusted with riverweed. I could see the reflection of the sky, fractured and rippling. And in that reflection, for a split second, I saw it, not my own face, but face bloated and pale, waterlogged, eyes wide and white like stones, mouth open in a silent scream. It vanished as a barge chugged past, churning the water into froth. I stumbled back, gasping. A young woman walking a golden retriever glanced at me, frowning. "You okay, mister?" Her dog whined, pulling toward the railing, hackles raised, staring at the spot where I'd seen the face. I ran, not home, to St. Vincent's Hospital. The ER waiting room smelled of bleach and despair. I waited 2 hours, my leg bouncing uncontrollably. When the young resident finally called my name, I blurted it out before he could sit down. I died last Tuesday in the river, under the Sycamore Street Bridge. I remember it, the cold, the bubbles, the silence. I rolled up my sleeve, showing him the faint blue stain on my forearm. "See? Drowned flesh. It won't wash off." The resident Dr. Chen didn't flinch. He examined the stain with calm professionalism. "Interesting discoloration," he murmured, pressing it lightly. "Looks like a mild bruise, or possibly a reaction to laundry detergent, common in cheap apartments with old pipes." He pulled up my chart on his tablet. "Mr. Vance, your records are clear. You presented to the ER last Tuesday night after a fall from your fire escape, approximately 8 feet. You sustained a minor scalp laceration and a bruised wrist. No fractures, no signs of submersion, no hypothermia, your clothes were dry, your core temperature was normal." He swiveled the tablet toward me. "Scans, X-rays, a CT scan of my head, all pristine, no trauma, no water in the lungs, no residue of river sediment under my nails. Nothing. Just Eli Vance, 32, with a minor head injury and a story no one believed. Dr. Evans has you on a low-dose antipsychotic for the dissociative episodes," Dr. Chen continued gently. "He believes the fall triggered a stress response. Your brain created a detailed, immersive fantasy to cope with the fear of falling. It's not uncommon. The blue mark, likely residual bruising from when you hit the ground. It'll fade." "But I remember the water," I insisted, my voice cracking. "I remember letting go. I remember the light fading." "You remember a dream," he corrected, his tone kind but firm. "A very vivid, traumatic dream. Your brain conflated the fear of falling with the fear of drowning. It's a protective mechanism." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're not crazy, Eli. You're healing. Trust the process. Trust the facts." He wrote a new prescription, stronger antipsychotics, and patted my back as he ushered me out. "Go home. Rest. Talk to Dr. Evans tomorrow." The sliding glass doors hissed shut behind me, sealing me out of the sterile, factual world. The river's roar filled my ears again. I looked down at my forearm. The blue stain seemed darker in the harsh afternoon light, like a fingerprint left by the dead. Dr. Evans's office was all beige carpet and framed motivational quotes. "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled." I sat rigidly in the plush chair, staring at the Rorschach blot on his desk. He listened quietly as I described the river, the bubbles, the face in the water. He took notes, nodded thoughtfully. "The persistence of the memory is significant, Eli," he said finally, steepling his fingers. "But persistence doesn't equal reality. Our brains are remarkable storytellers. After trauma, they weave narratives to make sense of the senseless. Your fall was terrifying. Your subconscious reached for the most primal fear it could find: drowning. It's not uncommon for near-death experiences, even imagined ones, to feel hyper-real." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Here's what we know for certain. You were found dry under the Sycamore Street Bridge. Your physical exam showed 0 signs of submersion. Your medical records are consistent with a minor fall, not a near drowning. Your memories are inconsistent with the physical evidence. Therefore, the memories are unreliable." He slid a brochure across the desk. "Understanding Dissociative Amnesia. Reclaiming Your Narrative. The medication will help. Quiet the intrusive thoughts. Give it time. And Eli? Stop going to the river. Avoid triggers. Your mind needs safety to heal." I took the brochure, didn't read it, walked home in a daze. The streets felt tilted, unreal, like a stage set. I passed a newsstand. The headline screamed, "Mysterious Death in River, Body Found Near Sycamore Street Bridge." My blood froze. I grabbed the paper. October 19th. Yesterday, a young man, mid-30s, no ID, found tangled in debris near the pilings, cause of death, drowning. Time of death estimated 2:00 a.m. to 4 a.m. Tuesday night. My night. I fumbled for coins, bought the paper, my hands shaking so badly I tore the pages. I hurried home, locking the door behind me, drawing the curtains. I spread the paper on the kitchen table. The grainy photo of the recovered body, bloated, face obscured by riverweed, sent a jolt through me. Not my face, a stranger's. But the clothes, waterlogged jeans, a dark hoodie. It could have been me. The article mentioned a witness, an elderly man walking his dog at 3 a.m. who saw a tall figure jump, but couldn't identify them in the dark. The police were treating it as suicide. No foul play suspected. I sank to the floor. The newspaper crumpled in my lap. The blue stain on my forearm pulsed faintly, cold against my skin. The copper taste flooded my mouth. This was proof. This was the truth. I died. This other man, this John Doe, had died instead. Or I was John Doe, stolen from the river, dumped dry on the bridge, given Eli Vance's life like a hand-me-down coat that didn't quite fit. The apartment felt suffocating. The peeling wallpaper seemed to breathe. The old pipes groaned like a dying thing. I needed air. I needed to see the bridge. Now I ran, ignoring the ache in my chest that wasn't there before, the strange lightness in my limbs. The city blurred past. At the Sycamore Street Bridge, police tape fluttered in the breeze, cordoning off a section near the railing. 2 cops stood guard, bored. I approached cautiously. "Excuse me, I think I might have seen something the night that man died." One cop, a heavy-set man with a mustache, eyed me. "You with the media? We're not giving interviews." "No, I live nearby. I saw a guy jump Tuesday night around 3 a.m. The cop's partner, younger, leaned in. "Yeah? What did he look like?" "Tall," I said, my voice tight. "Wearing a dark hoodie, he just climbed over and let go. No hesitation." The young cop exchanged a glance with his partner. The older one sighed. "Look, pal, we got that report. From an old guy walking his poodle. Said the same thing. But here's the thing." He pointed to the railing. "No scuff marks. No fibers caught on the metal. No witness saw anyone approach the bridge that night on the cameras." He gestured to a small, weatherproof camera mounted on a lamppost. "We checked. Clear. From midnight to 5 a.m. No one came near this railing except the old man and his dog. And you," he tapped his notebook. "You, Eli Vance, found sitting right here at 3:17 a.m., dry as a bone, babbling about a jump you didn't take. Security footage confirms it. You were alone. You never went near the railing." He closed his notebook with a snap. "Grief does funny things. That John Doe, he was your neighbor, wasn't he? Apartment 3B, 2 floors down. Real quiet guy. Worked nights. You probably barely knew him, but losing someone close, it messes with your head. Makes you see things. Makes you feel things that aren't yours." He put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Go home, son. Take your meds. Let the dead rest." I walked away, numb. Apartment 3B? I'd never noticed who lived there. Had I seen him in the hall, at the mailboxes? His face in the newspaper was a stranger's, but the blue stain on my arm burned cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights cast long, shifting shadows on the wall. The shadows looked wrong, thicker, hungrier. At 2:17 a.m., The time the cop said I was found on the bridge, the shadows in the corner of my room detached. Not my shadow, something else. A deeper darkness, coalescing into a shape, tall, thin, dripping. It didn't move toward me. It pointed, not at me, at the closet. Its form was indistinct, wavering like heat haze, but the finger was clear, accusing. I stood slowly, my heart hammering against ribs that felt too fragile. I opened the closet. Nothing, just coats. I pushed them aside, and there, behind my winter parka, taped to the back wall, was a small waterproof bag. I hadn't put it there. I tore it open. Inside was a wallet. Waterlogged, swollen. The ID photo showed a man with my eyes, my jawline, but not my face. His name. Daniel Shaw. Address, apartment 3B, 17 Sycamore Street, the John Doe from the river. Tucked behind the ID was a folded piece of paper. My own handwriting covered it, jagged and frantic. I took his place. The water gave him to me. It wanted a life. I offered mine. It took his instead. I am not Eli Vance. I am the space where he drowned. I remember the bubbles. I remember the letting go. They call it a miracle. It was a theft. Burn this. Forget. But I can't forget the cold. I can't forget the light fading. They say I'm fine. I am not fine. I am Daniel Shaw's ghost wearing Eli's skin. The river is in my bones. It is always hungry. I dropped the note. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. The dripping shadow was gone. Only moonlight pooled on the floorboards. I sank to my knees, the wallet clutched in my hand. Daniel Shaw's face smiled up at me from the ID, a life cut short, a life I'd stolen. The blue stain on my forearm was a deep, unnatural indigo now spreading like a bruise toward my elbow. The copper taste was a river in my mouth. I remembered, not just the drowning, the bargain. Standing on the bridge, the river whispering up through the cracks in the concrete, a voice like wet stones grinding. Together, one life for another, your pain for his peace, jump, and we will give you back the life you lost. Clara's face swam in my mind, her laughter, the scent of her hair, the warmth of her hand in mine, the loneliness that had hollowed me out after she left. I'd stepped onto the railing, closed my eyes. Take me, give me back what I lost. The cold hit, the current pulled, and in the dark water, something cold and ancient wrapped around my ankles, not to drag me down, but to push. I broke the surface gasping, not on the riverbank, but dry and shivering at the base of the Sycamore Street Bridge. Eli Vance's life flooded back into me, his memories, his apartment, his job. But beneath them, like a deep, cold current, flowed Daniel Shaw's final moments. The river hadn't given me back my life. It had given me his, and it was still hungry. I called Dr. Evans at 3 a.m. His voicemail was full. I called Brenda, straight to voicemail. I called Mark. Same. I sat on the floor, Daniel Shaw's wallet in my lap, the note crumpled in my fist. The street lights outside flickered, died. The apartment plunged into darkness. Only the glow of the digital clock on the stove, 3:17 a.m., the time I was found, the time Daniel Shaw died. The shadows in the corners deepened. Not one shadow, many, dozens, thin, dripping shapes, coalescing from the gloom. They didn't point. They reached. Cold, watery fingers brushed my skin. The whisper filled the room, not in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. He is not yours. Give him back. The bargain was for one. You took two. The river is hungry. I scrambled back, hitting the wall. I didn't know. I just wanted to stop hurting. The pain is the price. The voices hissed, a chorus of wet echoes. You stole his rest. Now you will rest. In the deep places where the light does not reach. The shadows surged forward, not to touch me, to become me. I felt them seeping into my skin, my bones, my breath. The blue stain on my arm spread like ink and water, swallowing my hand, my wrist. The copper taste became the taste of mud and decay. I remembered Daniel Shaw's last thought, not fear, but relief. Relief at the cold. Relief at the silence. Relief at the letting go. And I understood. The river didn't want Daniel Shaw back. It wanted me. It wanted the life I'd stolen. It wanted the pain I'd tried to bury. It wanted the space where Eli Vance had drowned his grief, and Daniel Shaw had drowned his life. It wanted the hollow place inside me. I stopped fighting. Let the cold fill me. Let the shadows pull me down. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was my own hand, raised in surrender. The blue stain was gone. My skin was pale, unmarked, clean, and on the floor where I'd been sitting, Daniel Shaw's wallet lay open. His ID photo smiled up, peaceful, at peace. The note was gone. Only a single waterlogged maple leaf rested beside the wallet. Out of season, out of place, glistening with river water. Outside, the streetlights flickered back on. Dawn bled gray over the city. In the apartment above Mrs. Gable's laundromat, the shower ran. Lukewarm water streamed down the tiles. A man stood beneath it, scrubbing his arms. His left forearm was perfectly clean, unblemished. He turned off the water, dried himself, dressed. He walked downstairs, nodding to Mrs. Gable on her stoop. "Morning, Mrs. Gable. Beautiful day." His voice was calm, steady. He walked to Data Key Solutions, Cubicle 4B. He input insurance claims with quiet efficiency. At lunch, Mark from accounting joined him. "Rough night?" Mark asked, eyeing the dark circles under the man's eyes. The man smiled, a warm, easy smile. "Just dreams. Dr. Evans says they'll fade." He took a bite of his turkey and avocado sandwich, Clara's favorite. He didn't notice the faint scent of river water that clung to his skin. He didn't feel the cold spot in his chest where a heart should beat. He didn't see the shadow that followed him, a shadow that didn't quite match his shape, a shadow that dripped faintly on the linoleum floor, a shadow that pointed not at the world, but at the hollow place inside his own chest. He was fine. Perfectly fine. The doctor said so. The records proved it. The river had taken its due. And the man who remembered dying, he was finally at rest, deep in the cold, dark water where the light never reached, where the bubbles rose like silver prayers and the silence was a blanket. The apartment was quiet, the shadows were still, and on the kitchen table, untouched, sat a new prescription bottle. The label read, "Eli Vance, take one daily for dissociative episodes." The pills inside were untouched, unneeded. The man didn't need them anymore. He remembered nothing. He was fine. He was home. He was empty. The river had won. And the thing wearing Eli Vance's skin smiled, tasting the copper on its tongue, and reached for another bite of sandwich. The hunger was quiet now, but it was never gone. It was only waiting for the next life, the next bargain, the next hollow place to fill. The shadow on the wall didn't move. It didn't need to. It was already inside, already home, already hungry. The silence in the apartment wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of the deep water, the silence after the last bubble rises, the silence of a life stolen and a life given back, empty, perfect, and utterly, terrifyingly fine. My phone shows photos of me in places I've never been. It started with a notification, not a text, not an email, a memory. Apple Photos, that relentless archivist, popped up a banner on my lock screen at 7:03 a.m. Memories from 3 years ago. 12 photos. January 7th, 2023. I almost swiped it away. January 7th. The day Sarah disappeared. I hadn't opened photos since the trial. Not after the prosecution subpoenaed my iCloud, scrolling through vacation snaps and birthday cakes to find the one gap. The 47 minutes between 11:03 p.m. and 11:50 p.m., where my phone had gone dark, its location pinging only the dead zone beneath St. Vincent's parking garage. But fatigue won. Or maybe curiosity. Or maybe something deeper, some part of me that still believed against all evidence that if I just looked hard enough, I'd find the frame where everything changed. The proof that I'd been there, that I'd done something. I tapped the banner. The first, photo loaded, not the garage, not my apartment, a desert highway. Sun-bleached asphalt stretching into heat haze. A rusted green pickup parked on the shoulder, and me, standing beside it, wearing a flannel shirt I'd never owned, squinting into the distance, one hand raised as if shielding my eyes, the other gripping a paper map. The timestamp, Jan 7, 2023, 11:14 a.m. Impossible. At 11:14 a.m. that day, I'd been in the radiology lab calibrating the CT scanner. Dr. Evans had signed my time card. Security cam footage placed me swiping into the staff entrance at 7:02 a.m. and out at 6:48 p.m. I scrolled. Photo 2, me sitting on the tailgate of the pickup, boots dangling, a thermos beside me. Behind me, a mountain range jagged against a cloudless blue sky. 11:22 a.m. Photo 3, me walking down a gravel road, dust kicking up around my ankles, a chain-link fence, and a faded sign visible in the background. Solitude. Pop. 0. 11:37 a.m. Photo 4, me, standing in the doorway of a saloon, lights spilling out behind me, face half in shadow. The warmth in my eyes wasn't exhaustion or grief. It was peace. 11:49 a.m. 11 more photos followed. Me at a diner counter, coffee steaming. Me kneeling beside a cactus, examining a bloom. Me leaning against the hood of the pickup, watching the sunset paint the mesas gold and violet. All time stamped between 11:14 a.m. and 4:02 p.m., all in places I'd never seen, all showing a version of me I didn't recognize, calmer, lighter, like a man who hadn't spent the last 3 years waiting for a knock on the door that never came. I closed the app, opened it again. The photos were still there. I checked my iCloud settings. All photos backed up. Location services enabled. Optimize iPhone storage off. Original stored locally. I scrolled to the library, sorted by date. January 7th, 2023, a block of 12 thumbnails, no gaps, no missing hours, just this impossible day. I tapped the first photo, expanded it, zoomed in on the map in my hand, not a digital printout, a folded paper map, Mojave National Preserve and vicinity, and in the corner, handwritten in blue ink, for Danny, drive west, breathe, S, Sarah's handwriting. My breath stopped. She'd never been to the desert, hated the heat, called it God's waiting room. I hadn't spoken to her that morning. We'd argued the night before about money, about her overtime, about the distance growing between us like a fault line. I'd said things. She'd said things. We'd hung up in silence. She wouldn't have sent me a map. She couldn't have. I called her number, the one I still dialed sometimes late at night, just to hear her voicemail. "Hey, it's Sarah. Leave a message." Before hanging up, it rang once, twice, then a voice not recorded, live. "Ben? Sarah?" A pause, not confusion. recognition. "Danny," she said softly, "you saw them? The photos?" "Yes." "Where are they? How is this possible?" Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "They're not from that day, Ben. They're of it. The day that could have been." "What does that mean?" "The map was real," she said. "I bought it that morning. At the gas station near the hospital. I was going to leave it on your windshield after my shift. A peace offering. A way out." She inhaled sharply. "But I never made it to my car." I leaned against the wall, the apartment tilted. "The phone. It's showing me what would have happened if I'd taken it." "If you'd chosen her over the guilt," she said. "If you'd driven west. If you'd let yourself be free. But why now?" "Because today's the 7th, she whispered. 3 years. The building, the one you're in, it doesn't just hold space. It holds time, fragments, possibilities, and on anniversaries, the walls get thin." I thought of the voices, the sigil, the man in the coat. "The apartment, it's showing me." "No," Sarah said. "You're showing yourself. The phone's just the lens." She hung up. I didn't redial. I opened photos again. Swiped to the last image. Me, standing on a ridge at dusk, back to the camera, arms slightly raised, facing the horizon. The caption, auto-generated by Apple, read, "Freedom." I tapped Share. Save to Files. Duplicate. The copy saved instantly. I deleted the original. The 12 photos vanished from the Memories banner. Relief flooded me, cold, dizzying. It worked. I'd purged it. But when I reopened the library, the photos were back. Not in the January 7th folder, in a new album, at the very top of the list, titled Daniel. I tapped it. Inside, more than 12 photos, hundreds, a lifetime. Me, older, silver at the temples, holding a fishing rod on a riverbank. Me, in a lab coat, but different. MRI tech, not radiology, smiling beside a machine labeled MedTech Solutions. Me, arm around a woman with dark hair and Sarah's eyes, standing before a small house with hydrangeas. Me, kneeling in a garden, helping a little girl plant sunflowers, all time-stamped in the future, 2027, 2031, 2035, all labeled Daniel and Elena. Daniel and Lily, Elena, Lily, names I'd never heard, names that fit, like keys sliding into locks I didn't know existed. I scrolled faster. A photo from last week, me, sitting at the counter of the Sunnyside Diner eating pie. The woman behind the counter, Lisa, smiling. Deck 31, 2025, 2:17 p.m. A photo from yesterday, me, standing in the corridor of the subway station, looking at the posters. Jamal beside me, pointing at the date. John 6, 2026, 8:42 p.m. A photo from today, me in the desert, beside the pickup, map in hand, squinting at the horizon. John 7, 2026, 11:14 a.m. Future, past, present, all bleeding together, all real. I opened my camera app, pointed it at the wall, pressed the shutter. The photo saved instantly. I opened it, not the wall, the saloon in solitude. Me, standing in the doorway, same flannel shirt, same peaceful expression. Timestamp. Just now. I dropped the phone. It landed screen up. The photo zoomed in automatically on the window beside me, in the reflection. 3 figures, gravel, ice, playful, watching, smiling. The phone buzzed. A notification, not from photos, from messages. A new thread. No contact name, just a number. +1 797 010 777. The message. You're not deleting memories, Daniel. You're deleting options. Every photo you erase narrows the path. Soon only one road remains. Choose wisely. The Architect. I picked up the phone, dialed the number. It rang once. A voice answered. Not synthesized, not distorted. Human. Eleanor Evans, my therapist. Ben, she said, or should I say, Daniel, you knew? I hoped, she corrected. The fugue was deep. You built an entire identity, Benjamin Carter, around the moment you froze, but the truth was always there, buried, waiting. What truth? That you did go to the garage, she said gently, that you did see the man, that you did try to stop him. My throat tightened. No, the security footage was tampered with, she said, by him, the man in the coat. He works for a different kind of institution, one that deals in unresolved moments, unmade choices. He didn't take Sarah, Ben. He offered her a choice, just like he's offering you one now. What choice? To live in the fracture or to heal it? I looked at the photo on the screen. Me, in the desert, free. Sarah's alive. Yes, Eleanor said, in a place where time isn't linear, where January 7th, 2023 is still happening, still waiting for you to arrive. How do I get there? The photos are the map, she said. Each one is a door, but you have to step into them, not just look. I opened the album again, tapped the first photo, the highway, the pickup, the map, held my thumb on the screen. A menu appeared. Share, favorite, edit, and at the bottom, new. Enter. I hesitated. Then I pressed it. The screen didn't fade. It deepened. The asphalt in the photo stretched toward me. The heat haze shimmered. The pickup's door swung open. I heard the creak of hinges, felt the sun on my face, smelled dust and gasoline. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new message. Last warning, Daniel. Once you step through, the bridge burns. No going back to Ben, only forward, only you. The sculptor. I looked at my reflection at the black phone screen. Ben's face. Tired, haunted, fractured. Then I looked at the photo. Daniel's face. Calm, present, whole. I took a breath, stepped forward, not physically, intentionally, and the world dissolved, not into darkness, into light, golden, dusty, real. I stood on the shoulder of the highway. Wind tugged at my flannel shirt. The pickup's engine ticked as it cooled, and on the hood, the map, unfolded, Sarah's handwriting clear in the sun. For Danny, drive west, breathe, S. I picked it up, looked west. The road stretched empty, ahead, waiting. I got in the truck, turned the key. The engine roared to life. I didn't check the rear view. I didn't look back. I just drove. Into the photo, into the possibility, into the day that was always mine. The phone, left behind on the apartment floor, screen still lit, showed one final photo. Me, driving, sun on the windshield, hand on the wheel, smiling. Timestamp. Jan. 7, 2026, 11:15 a.m. Caption. The road ahead. And beneath it, in small glowing letters, burned not into the screen but into the glass itself, the three symbols, the triangle, the circle, the spiral, not a warning, a welcome. Because some photos aren't memories, they're invitations, and some roads don't lead away from the past. They lead through it, straight to the life you were always meant to live. My therapist told me I don't exist. I rented a cheap room in an abandoned home because it was all I could afford, and because, if I'm honest, I like the idea. There's something about decay that feels honest, like the world finally admitting it's falling apart, just like the rest of us. The listing was sparse. Private room, utilities included, $350 a month, no questions asked. No photos, no address until after I wired the deposit. That should have been my first red flag, but I didn't have a job. My savings were bleeding out, and the last apartment I'd lived in had left me with mold in my lungs and a landlord who'd threatened to sue me for emotional damages after I reported him to housing inspection. So I said yes. I got a text with coordinates. A pin dropped in the woods 20 miles outside of Galesburg, Illinois. The house stood at the end of a gravel drive overgrown with thistle and wild sumac, its roof sagging like a spine bent by decades of weight. 2 stories, clapboard siding peeling in long gray strips, windows boarded or broken, one porch column snapped clean through and propped up with a rusted sawhorse. The front door hung open a few inches, swaying slightly in the late afternoon breeze as if someone or something had just stepped out. Inside, the air smelled of damp plaster, mouse droppings, and something sharper, like ozone after a lightning strike, or the metallic tang of blood left too long in the sink. My footsteps echoed hollowly across the warped floorboards. A narrow hallway led past 3 closed doors. At the end, a staircase spiraled up into shadow. A man stood beside it. He startled me, not because he moved, but because he hadn't been there a second before. One blink, empty space. Next blink, him. He was tall, gaunt, wearing a tweed jacket that might have been stylish in 1973, his hair thin and neatly combed, skin papery with age, but eyes startlingly bright, almost feverish. He smiled, not warmly, precisely, like a scalpel, finding its mark. "Elias," he said, not a question, a confirmation. I nodded. "You're the landlord?" "I am Dr. Arlen Voss," he replied, and yes, in a manner of speaking. He extended a hand. His grip was dry, cool, and lasted a beat too long. "The room is upstairs, last door on the left. You'll find it accommodating." He handed me an old brass key, tarnished, heavy, and turned without another word, vanishing into the darkness beneath the stairs. I called after him, about mail, about trash pickup, about anything. But no reply came. When I looked back, the space under the staircase was just a closet, empty, dusty. Had he gone inside? I hadn't heard a door open. Upstairs, the hallway was narrower, the ceiling lower, the wood groaning underfoot like it resented being walked upon. The last door on the left opened with a reluctant creak. The room was small but clean, too clean. A narrow bed with a faded quilt, a wooden desk, empty except for a single drawer, a wardrobe with both doors slightly ajar. One window, its glass cracked but intact, looked out over the overgrown backyard and a crumbling stone well half swallowed by ivy. No electricity, no outlets. A kerosene lantern sat on the desk, full, a box of matches beside it. I dropped my duffel bag and sat on the bed. The springs shrieked. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane. I lit the lantern. The flame wavered, casting long, trembling shadows. That's when I noticed the writing, not on the walls, not carved into the wood, on the glass. Someone had written on the inside of the window pane in what looked like grease pencil or charcoal, smudged but legible. "He watches through the walls when you sleep. Don't turn the light off. Don't close your eyes before the flame dies." I stared at it, wiped it with my sleeve. It didn't budge, not smudged, not even a streak. Like it had been etched into the glass itself, though there were no scratches beneath my fingertips. I lit a cigarette. I chain smoked then before the coughs got worse, and opened a window a few inches to let the smoke out. The night air was cold, still. No crickets, no owls, just silence, thick and absolute. Then a sound, a tap. From the wall behind the wardrobe, 2 seconds of quiet, then another. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, deliberate, not random settling, not a branch. This was knocking. I stood, walked to the wardrobe, pulled the doors open. Inside, empty hangers, a moth-eaten coat on the floor, and, on the back panel, a child's handprint in dust. Fresh, as if pressed there minutes ago. I turned, heart thudding. The lantern flame dipped low, then flared. In its sudden surge of light, I saw a face in the window, pressed against the glass from the outside, pale, gaunt, lips parted in a silent smile, eyes wide, black, empty, no whites, no pupils, just void. I stumbled back, knocked the lantern off the desk. The glass chimney shattered, the flame guttered, died. Darkness. I fumbled for the matches, struck one. The flame caught, trembling. I held it up. The window was empty. No face, no smudges, nothing. I spent the night sitting upright on the bed, back against the wall, knees drawn to my chest, the last match clutched in my sweating palm. I didn't sleep. I barely breathed. Every creak of the house was a footstep, every draft a sigh against my neck. At dawn, gray light seeped through the cracks in the boards outside. I opened the window fully. The air smelled of wet earth and rotting leaves. The well in the yard looked deeper than it had the day before. I found Dr. Voss in the kitchen. He was boiling water on a butane stove, humming softly. Something modal, dissonant, like Gregorian chant played backward. A single mug sat beside him. Steam curled from its rim. "Good morning, Elias," he said, not turning. "Sleep well?" I didn't answer, just stared at the back of his head, at the way his scalp showed through the fine strands of hair, at how his neck seemed too long, too thin, like a bird's. He poured the water into the mug, stirred, turned. His eyes weren't just bright now. They glinted, not with light, with something else, like there was glass behind them, or film. "Tea?" he offered. I declined. He smiled, not unkindly. "You're tense. Understandable. New environment. Unfamiliar stimuli. The mind seeks patterns, even where none exist." He sipped. "Have you ever considered therapy?" That's how it began. Not with an ad, not with a referral. Just a quiet question in a ruined kitchen, steam rising between us like a veil. I said yes. What else was I going to say? He told me his office was in the basement. Unconventional, I know, but quiet, undisturbed, ideal for deep work. The basement door was behind the stairs, low, heavy, reinforced with iron bands. It opened with a groan that vibrated in my teeth. The stairs descended into absolute black. "Lights are on a timer," he said. "They'll come on when you reach the bottom." I went down, 10 steps, 11, 12. Click. Fluorescent tubes flickered overhead, buzzing to life. The room was windowless, concrete-walled, 10 feet square, a single chair in the center, black leather, high-backed, bolted to the floor. Beside it, a small table with a glass of water, a notepad, a pen. No desk, no couch, no diplomas on the wall, just the chair and the mirror. It covered the entire far wall, floor to ceiling, edge to edge, framed in brushed steel. I sat. Dr. Voss didn't sit. He stood beside the mirror, hands clasped behind its back, watching me with that same precise smile. "Tell me, Elias," he began, voice soft, hypnotic. "When did you first notice the gaps?" "Gaps? In memory, in sensation, in continuity." He tilted his head, like missing frames in a film, a blink, and suddenly you're elsewhere. You don't recall walking there. You don't recall deciding to go. You just arrive. I thought of the night before, the face in the window, the knocking, the way I'd known. The writing was on the glass before I saw it. "Yes," I admitted. He nodded. "Good. Honesty is the first fracture we must widen to let the light in." He stepped closer. "Now, look at the mirror." I did. My reflection stared back, pale, dark circles under my eyes, hair unkempt. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't blinking in sync with me. I blinked. It blinked after, a half-second delay. I raised my right hand. It raised its left. No, it should raise its left. That's how mirrors work. But I lowered my hand. It kept its hand raised. Smiling? Not my smile. Smaller, sharper. I whipped my head toward Dr. Voss. He hadn't moved, still standing by the mirror, still smiling. "Don't look away," he said gently. "The dissociation intensifies with avoidance." I turned back. The reflection was gone. The mirror showed only the empty room behind me, the chair, the table, the stairs. But no, wait. The chair wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in it, slumped, head lolling, one arm dangling over the side, a man in a gray hoodie, jeans, scuffed sneakers, my clothes, my body. I stood, staggered back, hit the wall. "Sit down, Elias," Dr. Voss said. Calm, unmoved, I shook my head. That's me." "No," he said. "That's the vessel, the placeholder, the echo." He stepped in front of the mirror, blocking my view. "You see, Elias, consciousness isn't generated. It's captured. Like radio waves, like static on a dead channel. The brain doesn't produce the self. It tunes to it. And sometimes the signal degrades. Sometimes the frequency shifts." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small device, black, smooth, no buttons, no seams, like obsidian shaped by water. "This," he said, "is a resonator. It stabilizes the carrier wave." He held it out. "Hold it, just for a moment." I didn't want to, but my hand moved anyway. Reached, took it, cold, heavy, humming faintly, not in my ears, but inside my skull. A low subsonic drone that made my teeth ache. The mirror flickered. The image of my body in the chair dissolved like smoke. In its place, static. Black and white noise rolling and churning like an old TV with no signal. Then a shape emerged. A silhouette. Featureless. Humanoid. But wrong. Limbs too long, head too narrow, neck bent at an impossible angle. It stood in a reflection, facing me, though I was facing the mirror. It raised a hand, not to wave, to point at me, at my chest. Dr. Voss's voice came from far away. "You've been fading for months, Elias. Longer, perhaps. You stopped recognizing your own face in photos. You forgot your mother's voice. You'd reach for your keys and find them already in your hand, but you didn't remember picking them up. You thought it was stress, dementia, sleep deprivation." He stepped closer. It wasn't. The silhouette in the mirror took a step forward, not toward the glass, through it, its fingers pressed against the surface from the inside, the glass bulging inward like rubber. "Your signal is weak," Dr. Voss whispered. "The resonance is failing. You're slipping out of phase, and when the dissonance reaches critical threshold..." He paused, smiled. You ceased to exist. The glass rippled like water. The silhouette's hand broke through, gray, translucent, veins like cracks in porcelain. I dropped the resonator. It hit the floor and didn't bounce. It sank, sinking into the concrete like it was mud, vanishing in seconds. The silhouette lunged, not at me, through me, cold, beyond cold, like liquid nitrogen poured into my veins. My vision whited out. My ears filled with a high-pitched whine, then silence. Then I was sitting in the chair, my hands on my knees, my breath shallow. Dr. Voss stood before me, notepad in hand, pen poised. "How do you feel?" he asked. I opened my mouth. No sound came. I tried again. My throat worked, but no voice, just air. Panic surged. I clutched my neck, felt the Adam's apple rise and fall. But nothing. Dr. Voss nodded. The aphasia is progressing, expected. As the self destabilizes, language centers degrade first, then motor control, then autonomic functions. He scribbled something. "You're losing cohesion, Elias. You're becoming noise." I stood, tried to run. My legs wouldn't obey. They moved, yes, but slowly, jerkily, like a film skipping frames. One step, two, then blackout. I was at the top of the basement stairs. How? I didn't remember climbing. I turned, looked down. The basement door was closed, locked. From the inside, a tap came, then another. Tap, tap, tap. The same rhythm as before. I fled upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, locked it, though the lock was rusted, useless. I stared at the window. The writing was back, but changed. "He's in the walls now. He's in the floor. He's in your breath. Turn off the light. Let him in. It hurts less that way." I backed away, sat on the bed. My hands were trembling. I raised them, looked at my palms. The skin, it wasn't solid. In the lantern light, it shimmered, like heat haze over asphalt, like a signal losing strength. I touched my face. My fingers passed through my cheek for a fraction of a second. Not pain, not fear, just absence, a hole where I should be. That night, I didn't fight sleep. I lay down, blew out the lantern. Darkness. Then a sound. Not knocking. Breathing. From the wardrobe. Slow. Wet. Ragged. Not mine. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The wardrobe doors creaked open. Something stepped out. I didn't look. I couldn't. But I felt it. Cold air pooling around my feet. The mattress dipping. Not at my side, but beneath me, as if something were climbing up through the bed. A hand, dry, papery, familiar, rested on my chest. Not pressing, just anchoring, like a technician securing a cable. A voice, my voice, but hollow, distant, like it was coming from a speaker buried deep underground, whispered in my ear. "Let go. You were never here to begin with." I tried to scream. Nothing came out. I tried to move. My body didn't respond. But my eyes opened. Not I opened them. They opened. And in the darkness, I saw myself, standing beside the bed, pale, gaunt, smiling, wearing my face, wearing my clothes. But wrong. The eyes, black, empty, the mouth too wide. It leaned down. Its breath smelled of damp earth and static. It whispered, "Thank you for the room." Then silence, absolute. I tried to think, but thoughts unraveled, like threads pulled from a sweater. Mother's name? Gone. My birthday? Static. The color of my eyes. The last thing I knew was the sound of a key turning in the lock. The bedroom door opened. Footsteps. Dr. Voss's voice, calm, clinical. Session complete. Vessel decommissioned. Signal stabilized. A pause. Then softer. Welcome back, Elias. And then nothing. No darkness, no light, no breath, no thought, no I. Just empty frequency. Static on a dead channel. And somewhere, far away, a new tenant arriving at the house in the woods, unpacking a single duffel bag, lighting a kerosene lantern, seeing the writing on the window for the first time, and wondering with a shiver why it feels so familiar, why the face in the glass looks exactly like theirs, why, when they knock on the wall behind the wardrobe, something knocks back, and why, when they finally sit in the black leather chair in the basement and look into the mirror. The reflection doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, just watches and waits for the signal to fade, for the vessel to weaken, for the moment it can step through and become real again. I rented a room and forgot my name by the third night. The ad was buried deep in the classifieds, the kind of listing you only find when desperation overrides common sense. Room for rent, quiet street, very affordable, utilities included. No photos, just an address on the outskirts of town, in a neighborhood that seemed to have been forgotten by progress decades ago. The rent was impossibly low, a fraction of what I'd been paying for a shoebox apartment downtown. My savings were bleeding out after the layoff, and the thought of couch surfing indefinitely made my skin crawl. So, against the screaming voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother's, I called the number. The man who answered was named Mr. Henderson. His voice was dry, papery, and he spoke in clipped sentences that offered no warmth. He didn't ask for references, didn't want to meet me first, just told me to come by that afternoon with the first month's rent in cash. The address led me to a 2-story Victorian house, once grand, but now sagging under the weight of neglect. Paint peeled like sunburnt skin from the clapboard siding. Several windows were boarded up with mismatched plywood. The front porch groaned under my weight as I approached the heavy oak door. It opened before I could knock. Mr. Henderson was older than I expected, maybe in his late 70s, with watery eyes that didn't quite focus and skin the color of old parchment. He wore a threadbare cardigan, despite the mild afternoon. He didn't invite me in. He just gestured vaguely towards the interior with a trembling hand. Top of the stairs, second door on the left. Yours, keys in the lock, rent's due first of the month. No visitors. No noise after 10. The basement is strictly off limits. Do not go down there. His gaze drifted past me, down the overgrown path to the street, as if expecting someone else, or something else. The room was acceptable. Barely. It held a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a scarred wooden dresser missing one knob, and a single dusty window overlooking a tangled, weed-choked backyard. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else, a dry, almost chemical odor I couldn't place. The walls were a sickly yellow, stained with watermarks that looked like Rorschach blots in the dim light, filtering through the grimy window. There was no closet, just a hook on the back of the door. The single overhead light fixture held a bare bulb that flickered ominously when I flipped the switch. It was cheap. It was bleak. It was all I could afford. Mr. Henderson vanished into a darkened room on the first floor without another word, leaving me standing in the hallway with my single suitcase. The silence of the house was profound, not peaceful, but heavy, oppressive, like the air itself was thick and resistant. I dropped my bag on the bed, the springs groaning in protest. As I started unpacking my meager belongings, clothes, a few books, my laptop, I kept glancing at the door. The hallway outside my room was dark, the only light coming from my flickering bulb. I had the distinct, unsettling feeling that the shadows near the top of the stairs were deeper than they should be, as if they were clinging to the walls. That first night, the sounds began, not loud, not immediately terrifying, just wrong. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, the thin blanket pulled up to my chin, I heard it. A scratching, not the skittering of mice in the walls. I knew that sound from my old place. This was slower, deliberate. It seemed to come from the wall behind the headboard. Scritch, 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 pause, scritch. Like fingernails or maybe a blunt knife dragging slowly across plaster. I sat up, heart hammering against my ribs. Hello? My voice sounded thin, reedy, swallowed by the thick silence of the room. The scratching stopped instantly. I waited, holding my breath, straining my ears. Nothing, just the oppressive quiet. I told myself it was a house settling, old pipes, rats, despite the chemical smell. I eventually fell into a fitful sleep, jumping at every creak of the ancient timbers. The next morning, the house felt even quieter. I didn't see Mr. Henderson. A plate with dry toast and a cup of weak, lukewarm tea appeared on the small table in the cramped, gloomy kitchen downstairs around 8. No note. I ate quickly, the silence pressing in. The chemical smell was stronger here, mixed with dust and something vaguely sweet that turned my stomach. I spent the day wandering the town, trying to find work, trying to forget the scratching. But the image of the dark, shadowed hallway kept intruding. That afternoon, when I returned, the plate was gone. The house felt colder. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. I noticed the basement door for the first time. A heavy, scarred wooden door at the end of the first-floor hallway, partially obscured by a moth-eaten curtain. A heavy padlock hung open on it, but the door itself looked immovable, warped in its frame. Mr. Henderson's warning echoed, "Strictly off limits. Do not go down there." I felt a prickle of unease just looking at it. Night 2 was worse. The scratching returned, but it wasn't alone. Around 2 a.m., a new sound joined it, a low rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It came from directly below my room, the basement. It wasn't the sound of machinery or water. It was organic, heavy, like something large being dragged slowly across a floor, dragged, then lifted slightly, then dropped. Thump, dragging scrape. Thump. The scratching in the wall kept time with it, a frantic counterpoint. Scritch, scritch, thump, scritch, thump. I pressed my pillow over my ears, trembling. Sweat soaked through my t-shirt. This wasn't rats. This wasn't settling. This felt intentional, malicious. I got up, flicked on the light, and stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. The sounds stopped the moment. The light clicked on. Utter silence descended, heavier than before. I paced the small space, my bare feet cold on the worn floorboards. I checked the window, locked. The door, locked from the inside. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall where the scratching had been, then down at the floorboards where the thumping originated. The chemical smell seemed stronger in the darkness. acrid at the back of my throat. I didn't sleep again that night. I watched the windows slowly lighten from black to gray, the sounds not returning, but the memory of them vibrating in my bones. Exhaustion was a physical weight. When dawn finally came, my head throbbed. I felt hollowed out, scraped raw by fear and lack of sleep. Downstairs, the plate with toast and tea waited. I ate mechanically, the bread tasting like sawdust. The house felt watchful. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, more defined. I noticed things I hadn't before. A dark stain on the hallway, floorboards near the basement door that looked like old oil, a faint, almost imperceptible vibration in the floor when I stood near the top of the stairs, as if something deep below was humming. Mr. Henderson remained invisible. I tried calling out, "Mr. Henderson, hello?" Only silence answered, thick and suffocating. The urge to pack my bag and flee was almost overwhelming, but where would I go? My bank account balance flashed in my mind, a number that induced panic. I had to last a month. I just had to endure the nights. I spent the day in the town library trying to research the house. The internet access was slow, glitchy. I found nothing specific about 17 Willowick Lane, just a vague mention in an old newspaper archive about a tragic incident in the neighborhood in the 1970s. No details. The librarian, a woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses, glanced at the address I'd written down, and her expression shuddered. "That old Henderson place? Best leave it. Be, dear, things linger there." She wouldn't elaborate, turning back to her desk with a finality that discouraged further questions. Her words clung to me like cobwebs all the way back. Dusk fell early, casting long, distorted shadows across the overgrown lawn. The house looked different in the fading light. The boarded windows seemed like closed eyes, the sagging porch like a frowning mouth. The chemical smell hit me the moment I opened the front door. Stronger, sharper, almost like formaldehyde mixed with dust. It made my eyes water. I avoided looking at the basement door as I hurried upstairs. My room felt no safer. The flickering light bulb cast jumpy, leaping shadows that made the water stains on the walls writhe. I tried to read, but the words blurred. The silence was a physical pressure in my ears. I kept listening, breasting for the scratching, the thumping. Nothing came. That was almost worse. The anticipation was a wire tightening around my skull. I must have dozed, off sitting upright on the bed, the book slipping from my lap. I woke with a start to complete darkness. The bulb had finally given out. Moonlight, weak and watery, filtered through the grimy window, painting stripes across the floor. And then I heard it. Not scratching, not thumping. A sound I hadn't heard before, and one that froze the blood in my veins. It was a whisper, not from the wall, not from below, from the corner of the room, the darkest corner where the moonlight didn't reach. "Name," it breathed, a dry, papery sound, like dead leaves skittering on stone. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence with terrifying clarity. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My heart was a trapped bird in my chest. "What is your name?" The whisper came again, closer this time. I could feel the cold spot in the air where the voice originated, a pocket of frigid stillness near the dresser. Panic surged. I fumbled desperately on the bedside table for my phone, fingers clumsy with terror. The screen flared to life, blinding in the darkness. I swung the beam of light towards the corner. Empty. Just the shadowed corner, the dresser, the hook on the door. The whisper didn't stop. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around me like cold smoke. Tell me your name. My name, of course. Just tell it my name and it would go away. That's how these things worked, right? The thought was absurd, born of pure terror, but it felt like the only lifeline. I opened my mouth. My name is, I began, and stopped. It was gone. The name, the simple, fundamental word that was me, it evaporated from my mind like mist under a hot sun. I knew I had a name. I knew it was important, vital, but the specific sequence of letters, the sound, the identity it represented, it was simply absent. A blank space where my core should be. I stared at the phone screen, the bright light hurting my eyes. My reflection in the dark window pane looked back, pale, wide-eyed, a stranger. Who was that? Who was I? Name, the whisper urged. Closer still, it felt like icy fingers brushing the back of my neck. I could smell that chemical odor intensely now, mixed with the scent of old dust and something vaguely organic, like forgotten earth. Give it to me. I scrambled back on the bed, pressing myself against the headboard, the phone light shaking wildly in my hand. I tried to grasp the name. Images flickered, my mother's face, the layout of my childhood bedroom, the feel of my old dog's fur. But the name itself was a locked door. I couldn't find the key. A cold sweat broke out across my body. This wasn't fear anymore. This was dissolution. I was unraveling. Who are you? The whisper hissed, right beside my ear now. The cold spot pressed against my shoulder. The chemical smell was overwhelming, burning my nostrils. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, flowing towards the bed like dark water. The moonlight stripes on the floor vanished as the darkness thickened, becoming tangible, suffocating. I opened my mouth again, a silent scream trapped in my throat. I reached for the only thing I could cling to, the memory of signing the lease, my hand, my signature. I remembered the pen scratching on the paper, the shape of the letters. I didn't know the name, but I remembered writing it. The muscle memory, the first letter, a tall one, with a loop, or was it straight? My mind scrabbled frantically in the void. James, John, Mark, none of them felt right. They were just sounds, empty vessels. The signature, it started with a curve, a capital letter, J, no, T, maybe. It swam just out of reach, dissolving like smoke every time I tried to grasp it. Yours is gone. The whisper sighed, a sound of terrible satisfaction. The cold spot enveloped my arm. I felt a numbness spreading, not just physical cold, but a draining of something essential. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor, its light extinguished. Pitch blackness crashed down. In the absolute dark, the sounds returned, not just the whisper. The scratching in the wall was frantic now, gouging deep. The thumping from below was a steady, heavy pounding, shaking the floorboards beneath me. Thump, 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 and beneath it all a new sound, a wet, rhythmic squelching, like something thick being pulled through mud. It came from the direction of the basement door. It was getting louder, closer. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even remember why I was supposed to be afraid. The terror was still there, a raw animal thing in my chest. But it had no anchor, no name, no past. Just the crushing darkness, the invading cold, the sounds of something dragging itself up the basement stairs, and the suffocating chemical stench that filled my lungs. The whisper wasn't asking anymore. It was stating a fact over and over, a dry rustle in the dark that filled the hollow space where my name used to be. No name, no name, no name. The rhythmic squelching reached the top of the stairs. It paused outside my door. The cheap lock clicked, not turned, clicked, like a brittle bone snapping. The door creaked slowly open, revealing only deeper blackness in the hallway. The cold intensified, stealing my breath. The chemical smell became a physical force, thick and cloying, and the whisper, now seeming to come from the doorway, merged with the dragging, squelching sound just beyond the threshold. Come, now. No name. Come. I didn't resist. There was nothing left to resist with. No name to defend. No self to protect. Just the cold, the smell, the sound, and the waiting dark. I let the numbness take me. I let the void fill the space as the shape, indistinct, wet, and smelling of formaldehyde and earth, shuffled into the room, the last coherent thought that flickered and died was not fear, but a strange, hollow relief. The question was gone. The answer was gone. There was only the dark and the whisper and the dragging sound that was finally coming for the empty thing on the bed. I am no one. I am no one. I am no one. The thought repeated, a mantra in the crushing silence of my own erased mind, as the cold fingers, smelling of dust and chemicals and deep, undisturbed earth, closed around my wrist. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one.